Tonight, let's begin with something that seems almost too familiar to notice. A globe in a classroom, a map on a phone, a blue marble hanging in black space. From far away, Earth looks known. It looks named, measured, divided, charted, and understood. Continents sit in their recognizable shapes. Countries appear in colored boundaries. Coastlines curl around the edges of land in lines that seem settled and complete. We grow up with this image so often that it begins to feel final, as if the planet has already been fully introduced to us. And yet, if you let your mind rest on that quiet blue for just a moment longer, another truth begins to appear. Most of what you are seeing is ocean, not roads, not cities, not farmland, lights, borders, towers, stations, or homes. Just water, a vast moving skin of water spread across the surface of the world. And beneath that surface, below the glittering waves and the shifting weather and the drifting ships, lies a realm so large, so deep, and so difficult to enter that even now, in an age of satellites and supercomputers and machines that can look across the stars, much of Earth's ocean remains only lightly touched by human knowledge. It is a strangely comforting thought. On a planet we think of as mapped and measured, there is still an enormous place that keeps its distance. A place that resists complete familiarity. A place that, even now, remains mostly dark. When people first hear a phrase like 95% of the ocean is still unexplored, it sounds dramatic, almost impossible. Surely, on a modern Earth, we must know more than that. Surely the age of blank spaces is over. But the ocean invites a different kind of humility, because explored can mean many things. It can mean that a ship once crossed above a place. It can mean that sonar passed over part of the seafloor and turned depth into data. It can mean that a robotic vehicle descended for a few hours and sent back flickering images from the deep. It can mean that a sample was taken, or a current measured, or a sound recorded in darkness. And still, even with all of that, the ocean remains largely unseen in the most literal human sense. Most of it has never been visited the way a forest trail can be visited, or a desert plain, or a mountain pass. Most of it has never been quietly looked at by human eyes in person. Most of its floor has not been studied in detail. Vast regions remain known only as hints, outlines, textures and data, or places where instruments passed but understanding has not yet fully followed. The ocean is not empty space waiting for labels. It is full of movement, pressure, chemistry, life, terrain, sound, memory, and time. And perhaps that fullness is part of why it remains so mysterious. Land welcomes us in familiar ways. We are creatures of air and gravity and dry ground. We walk across landscapes. We pause. We build. We return. We leave footprints and roads and names. The surface world fits the scale of the human body. We can stand in it, look across it, and orient ourselves with relative ease. The ocean is different. Its surface alone can feel restless and shifting, never fully still. And below that surface, the world changes quickly. Light fades, pressure rises, temperature drops. The body, so well suited to air, becomes fragile. Vision narrows. Distance becomes harder to judge. Time itself seems to behave differently in deep water, where things drift, settle, and endure in long, quiet intervals. It is not just that the ocean is big. It is that it is big in a way humans are not naturally built to enter. That difference matters. because we often imagine exploration as a simple matter of going somewhere and looking around. But the sea does not offer that so easily. Even a relatively shallow descent changes the rules. The ocean presses inward from every direction. It absorbs light, carries sound in unusual ways. It hides terrain under miles of moving water. It makes observation difficult and expensive and slow. So when we say the ocean is unexplored, we are not confessing neglect so much as acknowledging scale. We are admitting that the planet contains a realm larger than our ordinary reach. And this is where the idea becomes quietly beautiful, because the unknown ocean is not somewhere far beyond Earth. It is Earth, not another planet, not a distant moon, not a science fiction world imagined under alien stars. It is here, beneath the same sky that hangs above cities and farms and forests, touches every continent. It shapes the weather, stores heat, moves carbon, feeds clouds, guides currents, and influences the breath of the world. It is not separate from daily life at all, even when daily life happens far inland. The hidden ocean is not distant from us. It is simply hidden in plain sight. There is something almost dreamlike about that. To live on a planet for an entire lifetime and still be surrounded by so much that remains out of view. To stand on a shore and know that beyond the bright line of waves lies a descending vastness that no glance can measure. To look at a map and realize that the blue parts are not blank in the sense of being empty, but blank in the sense of holding more than our knowledge has yet fully gathered. And perhaps this is why the ocean has always stirred something ancient in the human mind. Wonder, certainly, but also softness, reverence, a sense that not everything meaningful must be fully illuminated at once. For thousands of years, people crossed seas long before they understood what lay beneath them. Sailors navigated surface winds and stars while the deep below remained almost entirely beyond imagination. Fishers worked coastlines. Traders followed currents. Island cultures learned wave patterns, swells, reefs, birds, clouds, and seasonal change with astonishing skill. The sea was known intimately in one way and unknown utterly in another. That contrast still exists now. We know a great deal about the ocean and very little. We know enough to say it regulates climate, supports enormous ecosystems, and connects the planet in continuous motion. We know enough to send instruments into trenches, to map sections of the seafloor, to study coral reefs, to track migrations, to analyze salinity and currents and chemistry. We know enough to recognize that life in the sea can thrive in forms once thought impossible. And yet we know little enough that the ocean still produces surprises with remarkable ease. A strange creature caught on camera, a new ecosystem around a vent, an unexpected contour on the seabed, an unobserved pattern in sound, a bloom, a pulse, a migration, a behavior, a depth where life endures. The more carefully we look, the less the ocean behaves like a solved thing. Instead, it feels like a vast, unfinished sentence, or perhaps a library in darkness, where now and then a single page is lifted into the light. This is not failure. It is proportion. The ocean is large enough to keep wonder alive. And as we move through this journey tonight, that may be the most soothing thought of all. There is no urgency here to conquer every mystery. No need to force the sea into total clarity. Instead, we can simply drift closer to the edges of what is known. We can let our minds adjust slowly, the way eyes might adjust in dim light. We can accept that the world is still deeper than our daily routines suggest. That beneath shipping lanes and coastlines and weather maps, beneath the bright shallows and familiar beaches, there lies a realm that remains patient, shadowed, and immense. A realm that has watched ages pass in silence. A realm that holds mountain ranges no one has walked, valleys no wind has crossed, and living things shaped by darkness older than memory. And all of it belongs not to fantasy, but to the same earth beneath your feet tonight. This is where we begin, with a simple, gentle realization. We do not live on a finished world. We live on a world still keeping secrets, and many of its deepest secrets are blue. If the ocean keeps its secrets, it does not do so out of malice. It is not hiding from us in any deliberate way. It is simply being what it is: immense, deep, heavy, dark, cold, and wonderfully difficult to enter. When people imagine exploration, they often picture motion across an open surface. A traveler crossing a plain, a climber ascending a ridge, a rover moving over dust and rock. Even outer space, for all its danger, is often imagined as openness, as distance, as a vast emptiness through which machines can travel and look outward. But the ocean is not open in that way. The ocean is layered. To enter, it is not just to move forward, but to move down. And moving down changes everything. At the surface, the sea can seem bright and expressive. Sunlight dances there. Waves reflect the sky. Boats move across it. Coastlines frame it in familiar shapes. From above, the ocean sometimes appears almost welcoming, like a shimmering field of blue light spread beneath the day. But that bright upper skin is only the beginning. Below it, the sea becomes a different kind of world. Light weakens, color drains away, pressure builds quietly and continuously, temperature slips downward, and the comforting human sense of orientation begins to soften. On land, we are rarely aware of pressure. Air surrounds us so gently that we forget it is there. We walk through it without effort. We breathe it without thinking. The body is tuned to that invisible balance. But water is different. Water is dense. Even a small volume of it weighs more than we intuitively feel from looking at it. A glass of water seems light in the hand, a gentle and ordinary thing. But stack water above water, mile after mile, and the weight becomes extraordinary. The ocean does not merely surround objects within it. Presses. It leans inward from all sides at once. And with every descent, that pressure increases. Quietly, steadily, without pause. This is one of the ocean's first and greatest barriers to exploration. Not because pressure is dramatic in the way a storm is dramatic, but because it is constant. It does not flash or roar. It does not announce itself. It simply grows stronger the deeper you go, until materials, machines, and bodies all meet limits. A human being cannot simply swim down into the deep ocean and look around. The deep must be entered indirectly, carefully through engineering, specialized vessels, pressure-resistant housings, remotely operated vehicles, autonomous instruments, thick viewports, cameras sealed like secrets inside metal shells. Every dive into the deep is, in some sense, a negotiation with weight. And pressure is only one part of the story. There is also darkness. The ocean absorbs light with surprising efficiency. Even in relatively shallow water, the bright world above begins to thin. Colors disappear in stages. Reds fade first, then oranges, then yellows, until what remains is cooler and dimmer and more uncertain. Deeper still, sunlight weakens into twilight. Then even twilight is gone. And below that threshold, there is no dawn, no moonrise, no blue horizon, no familiar source of day. Only darkness complete enough that, without artificial light or living bioluminescence, sight becomes almost meaningless. For humans, this matters profoundly. We are creatures who rely on vision. So much of what we call understanding begins with seeing. We look, compare, recognize, identify, orient, and remember. Sight gives us confidence. It lets us map space quickly. It makes the unfamiliar feel manageable. But in the deep ocean, sight is fragile. A camera light may reveal a small circle of seafloor, a drifting animal, a column of marine snow, or the pale edge of a rock. Beyond that cone of illumination lies blackness again. The viewer does not receive a full landscape in one glance. The deep does not unfold all at once. It appears in fragments, in glimpses, in pieces lit briefly against an enormous unseen background. This creates a very different experience of exploration. To explore the ocean is often to know only a little of what surrounds you at any given moment. Not the whole valley, but one ledge. Not the whole plain, but one patch of sediment. Not the whole community of life, but a few drifting bodies passing through a field of dark. It is like trying to understand a cathedral by looking at it through the beam of a small lantern. And then there is temperature. The deep ocean is cold, often only a few degrees above freezing. This cold is not the quick, sharp chill of winter air on skin. It is slower than that, more patient, a cold that fills the water itself, occupying the environment as a basic condition of being. Machines must withstand it. Sensors must function within it. Materials behave differently inside it. And living creatures that thrive there do so not as visitors, but as inhabitants perfectly adjusted to a realm humans would find intolerable without constant technical support. Distance makes things harder still. The ocean is not just deep in isolated places. It is broad beyond easy intuition. The seafloor stretches across a planetary scale, with ridges, plains, fracture zones, trenches, mountains, and volcanic features spread under moving water that can be miles thick. Sending a research vessel into one patch of remote ocean is a major effort. Mapping a tiny fraction of that immense terrain takes time. Returning to the same site again and again can be expensive and logistically difficult. And unlike a landscape on land, the ocean often conceals the terrain beneath it completely. A mountain on land can be seen from miles away. A canyon can be approached and surveyed from its rim. A valley can be crossed on foot. But an underwater mountain does not announce itself to the eye from a distance. A trench does not cast a visible shadow from the surface. The water above smooths and hides what lies below, leaving the seafloor invisible unless instruments actively search for it. In that sense, the ocean is not only hard to reach, it is hard to picture. Even when we have measurements, the human mind is still trying to translate those measurements into meaningful form. And then there is motion. The sea is never truly still. Currents move through it. Layers slide past one another. Temperatures shift. Salt content changes density. Storms stir the upper ocean. Tides rise and fall. Particles drift downward. Animals migrate vertically through the dark. Sediments settle. Chemical plumes spread. The water itself is always doing something. This means the ocean is not just a place. It is a process, a moving body, a dynamic world that changes even while we are trying to observe it. If you pause with that thought for a moment, it becomes easier to understand why the ocean remains so resistant to total knowledge. It is not one obstacle, but many: depth, pressure, darkness, cold, distance, motion, scale, and each one multiplies the others. To explore the ocean is to work against conditions that humans did not evolve to handle directly. We belong to coastlines and boats and beaches and harbors, to the thin upper edge where sea meets sky. The deeper layers belong to another order of existence, one that requires patience, technology, and humility to approach. And yet, perhaps this is precisely why the ocean feels so powerful in the imagination, because it reminds us that not every frontier is far away. Some frontiers begin just below the waves. A few meters down, the world changes. A few hundred meters down, it changes again. A few thousand meters down, it becomes almost alien in its conditions, even though it is still entirely, unmistakably part of our own planet. That is the paradox. The deep sea is not a fantasy realm. It is real. It is here. It has geography and chemistry and life. It has rules. It has histories unfolding in darkness. And it has remained difficult for us not because it is unreal, but because it is so fully, stubbornly, physically real. The ocean keeps its secrets because the ocean is vast enough, heavy enough, and deep enough to do so naturally. Not as a locked room, not as a forbidden place, but as a world whose doors open slowly, one descent at a time, one beam of light at a time, one patient question lowered into darkness after another. If human life has an address in the ocean, it is written in light. We belong mostly to the thin, bright layer near the top, the place where the sea still reflects the sky, the place where waves glitter under the sun, where coastlines are visible, where boats travel, where divers descend briefly and return, where coral reefs glow in clear water, and where the world beneath the surface still feels connected to the world above it. This upper band of the ocean is, in many ways, the version we know best. It is the ocean of postcards and harbors, the ocean of beaches, fishing boats, salt in the air, and sunlight rippling across a shallow seabed. It is the ocean where people swim, sail, surf, and imagine they have touched the sea itself. And in a way they have, but only the first luminous edge of it. Because the ocean is not a flat blue sheet spread evenly over the earth. It is a volume, a vast three-dimensional realm layered in depth, changing with pressure, light, chemistry, and temperature as it extends downward into darkness. And the uppermost part, the part touched by the sun, is only a small fraction of the whole. This is easy to forget because sunlight feels so complete. Where light reaches, it creates confidence. Shapes become legible, colors bloom, movement can be followed with the eye. Even when the sea is deep, a bright surface can create the comforting illusion that the whole environment is somehow present and available to us. But light in the ocean is a limited visitor. It does not travel downward forever. As it enters the water, it begins to fade. The sea receives the sun, but it also softens and absorbs it, turning brilliance into dimness and dimness into dark. What feels like a shining open world from above is, below, a place where visibility narrows surprisingly fast. And so most human experience of the ocean takes place in a narrow zone where light still lingers. Near the surface, near the coast, near the breathable world. That is where our bodies can function with relative ease. That is where ordinary swimming is possible, where boats can float above us, where rescue is imaginable, where the horizon still gives orientation, and where day and night continue to shape the sea in familiar rhythms. This zone is full of life, phytoplankton drifting in sunlight, quietly making oxygen, fish feeding and flashing in loose schools, marine mammals surfacing for breath, sea turtles rising and sinking through warm shallows, coral systems building intricate cities in clear tropical water, kelp forests swaying like submerged woodlands, waves lifting and lowering everything in a slow, restless pulse. The surface layers of the ocean are dynamic, bright, and biologically rich. Much of the marine life people know best either lives there or depends on processes that begin there. Sunlight powers photosynthesis, and that energy helps support food webs reaching downward and outward through the sea. So this upper realm is not trivial. It is vital. It is simply not the whole story, because beneath this illuminated skin lies the majority of the ocean space. That is the perspective shift that matters. When we imagine the ocean, we often imagine its surface area. We think horizontally, as though the sea were mostly a spread of blue across the globe. But the ocean is also profoundly vertical. Its deeper layers extend far below the zone of ordinary human intimacy. And once the sunlit region begins to thin, the familiar ocean begins to dissolve with it. Colors change first. The reds and oranges that seem so natural in air become harder to find underwater. Tones cool. Warmth drains from the visible world. Shapes grow softer, more uncertain, as though the sea is slowly editing away the details we depend on. Then brightness fades further. The water becomes dimmer, bluer, quieter in appearance. Above, the surface may still be shimmering, but below, the world begins to feel suspended between visibility and obscurity, like late evening lasting much longer than expected. And eventually, even that partial light gives way to something else. Not simply deeper water, but another condition of existence altogether. This is one of the most astonishing facts about the ocean. The version humans know best is not the version that occupies most of its volume. The brilliant upper layer is real, important, and beautiful, but it is only the beginning of a far larger realm where sunlight no longer structures life in the way we instinctively expect. In that sense, the human relationship to the ocean is a bit like living at the entrance of a great cathedral and mistaking the doorway for the whole interior. We know the threshold very well. We know the breeze there, the angle of light, the sound at the entrance. But beyond that threshold stretches a space much larger, dimmer, and more mysterious than the doorway suggests. And perhaps this is why the ocean can feel so psychologically vast, even before one learns any numbers or measurements. Standing by the sea, a person senses not only width but depth, not only distance across but distance down. The eye cannot follow that descent. The body cannot inhabit it naturally, yet the imagination feels it. Some quiet part of the mind understands that the water before us is not just a surface, but a cover over hidden volume, a lid over immensity, That feeling becomes even more striking when we remember how many human systems cluster near the margins of the sea. Ports, cities, fisheries, ferries, resorts, naval routes, tourist beaches, coastal roads, shipping lanes, piers, marinas, and seaside neighborhoods all gather around the interface between land and shallow water. Human civilization has long used the ocean's edges while rarely entering its deeper body. We have crossed it more often than we have truly gone into it. The surface has always been our highway. The depths, by contrast, have remained another country. Even science, with all its remarkable tools, often begins at the top and works downward with effort. Instruments are lowered, sensors drift, sonar scans beneath ships, robots descend into limited windows of observation. Every meter farther from the sunlit world requires more specialization, more energy, more planning, more acceptance that the environment is no longer shaped to our instincts. So there is something almost tender about the upper ocean. It is the meeting place, the layer where two worlds overlap. Air above, water below, feathered birds diving in, flying fish breaking the surface, rain entering from clouds, whales coming up to breathe, moonlight touching waves. The surface zone is a threshold space, neither fully ours nor fully beyond us, but shared in brief and beautiful ways. This is why it has such a strong hold on human memory and imagination. It is the ocean we can smell, hear, and approach. The one that glows at sunset. The one that collects stories of voyages, storms, shorelines, and return. And yet, for all its beauty, this bright layer can also mislead us, because it feels representative, feels like the ocean in full, but it is more like the opening sentence of a very long book. Below it are chapters written in twilight, then in darkness, then in pressures and temperatures that seem almost impossible from the perspective of ordinary life. Below it are habitats where no sunlight falls, where creatures communicate with light of their own making, where food arrives as drifting particles or chemical energy, where the pace of existence can feel far removed from the glittering motion of the waves above. The upper ocean is where we mostly meet the sea, but the deeper ocean is where the planet becomes truly difficult to imagine. And that is what makes this bright surface layer so fascinating. It is both real and incomplete. A true beginning, but only a beginning. A visible ribbon stretched over invisible vastness. A thin, bright place where humans mostly live, floating at the edge of an older, darker world beneath. So tonight, as we continue our descent in thought, it may help to hold this image gently in mind. Above, a skin of silver blue light. Below, a gradual fading. And beneath that fading, the greater body of the ocean waiting in silence, patient and immense, long before we arrive, and unchanged by whether we ever fully understand it. There is a moment in the ocean when the world does not become dark all at once, but slowly, almost politely. The brightness above begins to loosen. The surface is still there, far overhead, but it no longer feels like a ceiling of living light. Instead, it becomes something more distant, a pale memory filtering downward through water that grows dimmer meter by meter. The sun has not vanished entirely, but it has lost its authority. It no longer fills the sea. It only reaches into it. This is the beginning of the twilight zone, a realm not of full day and not yet of total night, a place of fading blue, softened edges, and suspended life. If the upper ocean feels familiar to humans, this layer feels like a threshold into strangeness. It is still connected to the world of sunlight, but only faintly. Enough light remains to suggest shape, movement, and direction. Yet that light is no longer generous. It is thin now, filtered, diluted, as though the sea has taken the bright language of day and spoken it in whispers. To descend into this zone, even in imagination, is to enter a slower mood. Above, the ocean glittered. Here, it seems to breathe in muted tones. The water becomes a kind of blue dusk held in suspension. There are no trees, no clouds, no horizon line to orient the eye. There is only volume, dim volume, a space where up and down still matter, but where the visible world has already begun to retreat from certainty. And yet this region is not empty. Far from it. The twilight zone is filled with life. Not the bright, easy-to-recognize life of shallow reefs and sunlit coasts, but drifting, gliding, hidden life. Bodies shaped for low light, eyes enlarged to gather what little brightness remains. Muscles adapted for vertical travel. Transparent tissues, silvery flanks, quiet organs that produce light in the darkness just below. This is one of the great sleeping wonders of the sea. As sunlight fades, life does not fade with it. It changes. It becomes subtler, stranger, more measured. Animals in this zone live in conditions that would already feel severe to us. There is less light, less warmth, less visual certainty. The pressure continues to rise. The upper world grows farther away. And still the water is alive with motion, much of it delicate enough that we would miss it entirely without instruments, nets, cameras, or long, patient observation. Many creatures here are small, not unimportant, only small. Small fish, gelatinous drifters, shrimp-like beings, squid, siphonophores, jellies, and countless other forms that together create one of the most active hidden communities on Earth. In daylight hours, many remain deeper, staying concealed in dimness. Then, under cover of night, immense numbers begin to rise. This movement is so vast that it is often described as one of the largest migrations on the planet. And yet, most people never see it. Each evening, as darkness spreads across the ocean's surface, creatures from deeper waters travel upward toward richer feeding grounds. Each morning, before the return of full light, they drift or swim back down again into safer obscurity. It happens every day, or rather every night, a planetary pulse of ascent and descent, carried out beneath the waves with little human witness. There is something almost lullaby-like about that rhythm. Upward in darkness, downward with dawn, a migration not across land, but through depth. Not over roads or mountain passes, but through gradients of fading light. The twilight zone, then, is not simply a place between surface and deep. It is a living corridor, passage layer, a realm of timing, a region where animals are exquisitely tuned to small changes in light, and where survival often depends on being seen less, not more. This makes the twilight ocean a place of subtle disguises. Silver sides that reflect the dim blue around them, transparent bodies that vanish almost completely, dark backs that blend into deeper water when viewed from above. And one of the most beautiful adaptations of all, tiny points of light. Bioluminescence begins to matter greatly here. Some animals produce their own glow through chemical reactions inside the body. In the fading blue, these faint lights can become signals, lures, decoys, warnings, or camouflage. A creature may illuminate its underside to match the weak light filtering down from above, making itself harder for predators below to detect. Another may flash to startle. Another may glow to attract prey. Another may shimmer simply because evolution, working slowly over ages, found light more useful than darkness alone. It is astonishing to think about. In a place where sunlight is failing, life begins making its own. Not to brighten the whole sea, only enough. A pulse, a glimmer, a code, a small lantern in water otherwise slipping toward night. And perhaps that is part of why this region feels so dreamlike. It contains both the remnants of the day and the first true inventions of the dark. It is not fully the world above and not fully the world below. It is the ocean in transition, suspended between two different ways of being. Even sound seems different here, though perhaps that is partly imagination. One can picture the faint clicks, the subtle movements, the distant passage of bodies through water. The sea no longer appears wide and sparkling. It feels enclosed by depth, though in reality it remains vast. The dimness itself creates intimacy, as darkness often does. What cannot be seen all at once begins to feel close, even when it is immeasurably large. For humans, this zone is psychologically important because it reveals how quickly the ordinary world disappears underwater. Not after miles of descent, much sooner than that. A person standing on a sunny deck could look at the water and imagine openness. But only a modest descent downward, and the sea is already becoming another environment entirely. Light weakens, visibility shrinks, creatures change shape, human instincts begin to lose their usefulness. In that sense, the twilight zone is where the ocean first teaches humility in earnest. Says, the world you know ends earlier than you thought. Below this, the rules will continue changing. But already, here in the dim blue, they have begun. And still there is beauty, gentle, drifting beauty, the beauty of restraint, the beauty of a place that does not reveal itself through spectacle, but through quiet adjustment. Eyes widening, bodies thinning, movements slowing, light becoming precious, life learning to speak in shadows. If the sunlit ocean is the sea's bright introduction, then the twilight zone is its softer voice, the part that invites you farther in, but with care. The part that says the descent into mystery is gradual. That darkness, when it comes, is approached through blue. That strangeness does not begin with monsters or extremes, but with small, elegant changes almost too subtle to notice at first. Tonight, in thought, we can rest there for a moment. Not in fear, not in urgency, only in wonder, suspended in dim water, between brightness and blackness, between the known and the hidden, in the ocean's long blue evening, where countless lives rise and fall with the light, and the familiar world above has already begun to feel very far away. There comes a depth in the ocean where sunlight is no longer merely weak. It is gone, not faded, not dimmed into a final trace. Gone completely. Above, far above, the surface still receives the day. Waves still catch the sun. Clouds still pass overhead. Morning still becomes afternoon, and afternoon still softens toward evening. But down here, none of that arrives in the usual way. The sea has crossed a threshold beyond which the sun no longer shapes the world through sight. This is where the deep ocean truly begins, and it is difficult to overstate how extraordinary that is. On land, nearly every landscape we know is arranged in some relationship to sunlight. Forests grow under it, deserts burn in it, mountains cast shadows because of it. Even caves, hidden under rock, belong to a surface world defined by day and night above. Sunlight is so fundamental to ordinary life that its absence feels like an exception. But in the deep ocean, absence is the rule. Darkness is not an event. It is the setting, a continuous condition of existence stretching across immense distances, covering the largest living space on Earth. That phrase deserves to be held gently for a moment. The largest living space on Earth. Not the forests, not the grasslands, not the surface of the sea, but the deep ocean, a world without sunlight, occupying an enormous share of the planet's habitable volume, filled not with emptiness, but with life adapted to a reality humans rarely encounter even in imagination. This is one of the quietest revolutions the ocean offers the mind. It asks us to let go of a very old assumption, that light is the natural center of life. For us, it often is. For much of Earth's surface biology, it is. But the deep sea reveals another possibility. A living world can flourish in darkness, not as a broken version of the sunlit one, but as its own complete system, with its own patterns, its own timings, its own logic. Here, the familiar cues of the surface lose their authority. There are no dawn colors spreading across a horizon, no visible noon, no sunset, no moonlit shimmer on waves. And yet life continues. Creatures feed, drift, hunt, hide, reproduce, communicate, and endure, all in a place where daylight never enters. That fact alone makes the deep sea feel almost philosophical. It is a reminder that reality is larger than the conditions comfortable to the human body. And yet, for all its strangeness, the deep ocean is not a fantasy world. It is profoundly physical. Pressure is immense. Cold is constant. Food can be scarce. Movement through the water takes energy, and energy must be used carefully. This often gives the deep sea a different mood from the lively upper ocean. The bright surface layers can feel busy, glittering, restless. The deep feels more measured, more economical, more patient, not empty but disciplined, not lifeless but slow in a way that matches the environment. If the shallow sea resembles a bustling shoreline town, the deep ocean is more like a vast cathedral after midnight, still inhabited, still full of presence, but hushed. Every action seems to matter. Every movement seems deliberate. And because sunlight does not reach here, the deep ocean is shaped by other sources of structure. Pressure becomes one of them. Temperature becomes another. Chemistry becomes another still. In the world above, light often determines where life gathers and how ecosystems are organized. In the deep, other gradients matter more. Tiny shifts in food supply, oxygen, currents, and chemistry can shape entire communities. The sea floor itself begins to matter in new ways too. A ridge, a slope, a canyon wall, a vent, a plain of soft sediment. These become not just features of terrain, but architectures of survival. Even the food arriving here often comes from elsewhere. A slow drifting rain of organic particles sinks from the surface layers above. Dead plankton, fragments of bodies, waste, marine snow so fine and constant that the deep sea receives the leftovers of the bright world in a long continuous fall. It is a strange and humbling image, the upper ocean shedding nourishment downward into darkness, where unseen lives depend on what descends. So the deep sea is not separate from the rest of the planet. It is connected intimately to it. The bright and the dark are linked. The surface and the abyss are part of one moving system. What happens in sunlit waters can matter far below, just as what the deep stores and circulates can influence the planet as a whole. And yet, despite that connection, the deep remains psychologically distant from us. Perhaps because darkness changes scale. When a place cannot be seen all at once, it becomes harder for the mind to feel its true size. The deep ocean is enormous, but because it is hidden, people often imagine it only in fragments. A submersible here, a fish there, a trench, a vent, a monster-like silhouette from a documentary. But in reality, the deep is not a collection of curiosities. It is a continuous realm, an immense dark body extending across the planet. A place so large that our visits to it have been brief, local, and rare compared with the totality of what remains. This is why the deep sea can feel at once both ancient and unfinished. Ancient because it has existed through ages of planetary change, holding stable darkness while continents shifted and climates rose and fell. Unfinished because, to us, it remains only partially known. Each expedition illuminates a little more, but only a little. A camera may reveal a new organism. A map may sharpen a stretch of seafloor. A sample may revise what we thought possible about deep life. Yet the overall realm remains overwhelmingly intact in its mystery. And perhaps that is what makes the beginning of the deep ocean so powerful. It is not only a physical threshold, it is a mental one. Above it, humans can still imagine the sea as something broadly familiar. Below it, the imagination must adapt. It must accept that the largest habitat on Earth is one in which human senses are naturally ineffective. It must accept that life can be abundant where sunlight does not go. It must accept that darkness is not the same as emptiness. That unseen is not the same as unimportant. That hidden is not the same as still. In the deep ocean, the planet continues without our gaze. That may be one of the most calming truths in all of marine science. Far below ships and storms and coastlines and headlines, there is a world moving at its own pace, under conditions older than human civilization, in darkness so complete that day itself becomes irrelevant. And still it lives, still it pulses, still it holds forms of beauty adapted not to brilliance, but to scarcity, not to exposure, but to concealment, not to speed, but to endurance. So tonight, as we cross this boundary in thought, we do not need to imagine the deep as frightening, only profound, a place where sunlight ends, but life does not, a place where the visible world yields to another order of existence, a place vast enough to humble us, quiet enough to soothe us, and real enough to remind us that much of Earth unfolds beyond the reach of ordinary light. In the deep ocean, pressure is everywhere. It does not arrive as a sound. It does not flash like lightning or crash like a wave against rock. It simply exists, steadily and completely, pressing inward from every direction at once. And because it never pauses, it becomes one of the defining truths of the deep sea. For a human mind, pressure is a difficult thing to picture. We understand weight easily when it falls downward. A stone rests in a hand. A book sits on a table. Snow gathers on a roof. Gravity gives pressure a direction we can feel, down. But underwater, pressure surrounds. It is not above you or below you in any ordinary sense. It is around you, on every side, a quiet force applied equally and continuously by the sheer mass of water overhead. And the deeper you go, the more water there is above. That simple fact changes everything. At the surface, water feels gentle to us. A hand moved through a bath or the sea meets softness, resistance, coolness perhaps, but not menace. Water appears yielding. It shapes itself to the body. It ripples and parts and flows. Yet this softness is deceptive, because water is also heavy, very heavy when gathered in great vertical distances. A column of ocean stretching downward for kilometers is not merely a beautiful blue space. It is a towering weight, and that weight is carried into the deep as pressure so immense that human bodies cannot tolerate it unprotected, and ordinary machines cannot survive it without careful design. This is one of the great hidden realities of ocean exploration. Before we can even ask what lives in the deep, or what the seafloor looks like, or what mysteries remain below, we must first solve the problem of staying intact. The deep ocean does not welcome fragile things, or perhaps more accurately, it transforms the meaning of fragility. A paper cup lowered into the depths can come back crushed into something tiny and folded, as if squeezed by invisible hands. Metal housings must be shaped and tested to endure the load. Cables, seals, lights, batteries, lenses, electronics, all must be made with the knowledge that the sea is not passive. It is pressing in, constantly. Even the vessels that carry people or instruments downward must become, in a sense, islands of resistance. Small dry spaces built to keep pressure out. Tiny pockets of surface world conditions suspended within an environment that would otherwise collapse them. There is something almost poetic in that. To explore the deep, humans do not simply enter another world. They carry a little piece of their own world with them, a sphere of air, a wall of engineered strength, a bubble of ordinary pressure moving slowly through extraordinary weight. And yet, for the creatures of the deep, pressure is not an obstacle. It is home. That may be the most astonishing part. What destroys or crushes our tools when they are poorly designed is, for deep-sea life, simply the normal condition of existence. Fish, crustaceans, worms, microbes, jelly-like drifters, and countless other organisms live under pressures that seem unimaginable from the human perspective. Their bodies are not resisting the deep in the way ours would have to. They are shaped by it, adjusted to it over immense spans of evolutionary time. This means deep-sea life often looks different not because the ocean is trying to be strange, but because pressure has helped decide what forms are possible there. Air-filled spaces become rare or must be handled differently. Rigid structures can behave differently under such conditions. Soft tissues, flexible bodies, gelatinous forms, delicate-looking anatomies. Many of these make more sense in the deep than they would at the surface. What seems fragile to us may, in fact, be perfectly suitable in a world where buoyancy and pressure change the engineering of life itself. So pressure is not just a hazard. It is an architect, an invisible sculptor of bodies, behaviors, and habitats. It decides what machines can function. It decides how explorers must build. It helps decide what kinds of organisms can thrive and what biological strategies make sense. And yet, because pressure cannot be seen directly, it remains one of the ocean's quietest forces. Darkness can be imagined. Cold can be felt in thought. Distance can be mapped. But pressure is more abstract. It reveals itself through effects: a cracked housing, a crushed object, a specialized submersible, a creature whose body seems almost liquid in its softness. Pressure is known by what it requires, what it permits, and what it forbids. Perhaps that is why it feels so profound. It is invisible but never absent. There is also something calming in the steadiness of it. Pressure in the ocean is not random. It does not change its mind. It follows depth with absolute consistency. Meter by meter, the sea becomes heavier in its demands. There is no argument with this, no bargaining, no surprise exception. The ocean keeps its rules, and life, where it has endured, has learned those rules intimately. In a way, pressure teaches one of the ocean's deepest lessons. A world can be harsh without being chaotic. The deep is extreme, yes, but it is also orderly. Its conditions are difficult, but not whimsical. And because of that, evolution has found ways to live there, and science has found ways to visit there, even if only briefly. When humans descend into the deep in submersibles, the drama often lies not in speed or motion, but in containment. The vessel becomes everything. Its walls are the difference between survivable and impossible. The people inside may be calm, speaking softly, watching instruments glow, while outside the water bears down with immense force. There is no visible monster at the window, no cinematic storm in the usual sense. Only darkness, cold, and pressure beyond direct sensation because the vessel is holding. That contrast is one of the most beautiful things in deep exploration. Inside, breath, light, quiet voices, human attention. Outside, a world of crushing weight, ancient darkness, and creatures perfectly at home. The line between the two may be only inches of material, and those inches represent centuries of curiosity, engineering, mathematics, testing, and courage. Without them, the deep would remain entirely beyond our reach. With them, even briefly, we can lower ourselves into a part of Earth that was once almost purely theoretical to the human imagination. Still, it is worth remembering that most of the deep ocean is not experienced from inside human-occupied vessels. Much of what we know comes through remotely operated vehicles, instrument packages, landers, cameras, and sensors. We often send machines because the environment is so demanding. Pressure makes exploration expensive, careful, and technologically dependent. Every successful observation, then, is a kind of earned glimpse, not because the ocean is guarding its secrets intentionally, but because the weight of water itself insists on patience. It insists on respect, and perhaps that is fitting. A realm so immense should not be easy to enter carelessly. So tonight, as we imagine the deep sea pressing outward in all directions, it may help to think of pressure not only as a problem, but as a presence. A silent law of the ocean, a force that shapes what can descend, what can survive, and what kind of life emerges in the dark. Invisible, total, steady. The deep sea's way of reminding us that beneath the beauty of blue water lies a physical world of remarkable seriousness. and that even there, under enormous weight, life has found not merely a way to endure, but a way to belong. Far below the shifting skin of the sea, beneath the bright surface and the fading blue and the great descent into darkness, the ocean floor begins to appear not as an abstract bottom, but as a landscape. A real landscape, not flat in the simple way children sometimes imagine the seafloor to be, like the bottom of a pool or the underside of a blue blanket spread across the earth, but varied, textured, broken and lifted and folded. A world of rises and slopes, long plains, steep walls, trenches, ridges, volcanic peaks, and canyons large enough to humble the imagination. This is one of the quiet surprises of ocean science. When we speak of the deep sea, we are not speaking only of water. We are also speaking of terrain, hidden terrain, a geography beneath geography. And because it lies under kilometers of moving water, most of it is harder for us to picture than mountains or valleys on land, even though many of its features are just as grand, and some far grander. On land, landscapes announce themselves. A mountain stands against the sky. A canyon opens at your feet. A ridge can be seen from miles away in changing light. But the seafloor does not offer itself so easily to vision. It remains covered, concealed beneath a vast volume of water that hides relief and distance from ordinary sight. A ship may pass over an underwater mountain without any hint from the eye of what rises below. A trench deeper than any valley on land may lie silently beneath a calm and ordinary-looking patch of sea. This concealment changes the way humans relate to underwater geography. We have not wandered the seafloor in the same way we have crossed deserts or climbed ranges. We have not lived among its contours. We have not watched its silhouettes change with sunset. Instead, we have assembled its form gradually, through sonar, sampling, remote imaging, and patient mapping. So the seafloor entered human understanding differently than most landscapes do. Not first through footsteps, but through echoes, a pulse sent downward, a return signal rising back up, distance translated into depth, depth translated into shape, shape translated, slowly, into maps of a hidden world. There is something deeply beautiful about that we have learned the architecture of the deep not by standing in it, but by listening for it. And what we have heard is astonishing. The ocean floor is not smooth. It is not uniform. It is not a quiet, featureless bed of mud stretching endlessly beneath the water, though there are broad abyssal plains where sediments settle in immense calm. But these plains are only part of the story. Elsewhere, the seafloor rises into mountain chains that extend for extraordinary distances, breaks into fracture zones, opens into trenches of enormous depth, and gathers itself into volcanic structures, escarpments, plateaus, and steep submarine canyons carved by long geological histories. If all the water could somehow be lifted away, the earth beneath would look both familiar and alien. Familiar because it would still be a world of landforms. Mountains, valleys, plains, cliffs. Alien because of the scale, arrangement, and hidden continuity of those forms. The ocean conceals one of the planet's greatest geographies, a second face of Earth. One we rarely imagine clearly because it almost never enters daily life. And yet it is there, ancient and dynamic, silent under pressure, a terrain without weather in the ordinary sense, yet shaped by forces far older and slower than storms. Some parts of the deep seafloor are astonishingly flat. These abyssal plains are among the smoothest large regions on Earth, blanketed by fine sediments settling downward through the water over long spans of time. To imagine them is to imagine stillness on a planetary scale. Vast dark expanses where particles drift down like slow underwater snow, collecting century after century into a soft and quiet cover. But smoothness is only one mood of the deep. Elsewhere, the seafloor becomes dramatic. Ridges rise where tectonic plates shift apart. Volcanoes build upward from beneath the crust. Seamounts stand like submerged peaks, sometimes alone, sometimes in chains. Canyons cut down from continental margins, guiding sediment and currents into deeper basins. And trenches open in long curving depressions where one part of Earth's crust bends beneath another and sinks toward the interior of the planet. Even the word terrain begins to feel too small for such a place, because these are not only shapes, they are histories. Each contour on the seafloor records some long conversation between rock, pressure, movement, heat, time, and the planet's restlessness beneath the crust. The ocean floor is not merely lying there, finished and inert. It is part of an active Earth. New crust forms in some regions. Old crust is recycled in others. Sediments gather. Slopes collapse. Hydrothermal systems alter rock with hot mineral-rich fluids. The deep ocean floor is both ancient and continuously becoming. That mixture of stillness and change is part of its enchantment. To human senses, the deep seafloor can feel eternal, dark, quiet, untouched, and in one sense, it is. Many places down there have never been directly seen. Many remain known only through coarse mapping or partial observation. Their silence, from a human point of view, is almost total. And yet, geologically, the seabed is never truly asleep. It rises, spreads, fractures, cools, subducts, settles, and records. The hidden floor of the ocean is alive with deep time processes, moving far more slowly than weather, but no less powerfully. There is also something humbling in how little of this terrain humans have visually witnessed. We may know that a ridge exists. We may know the approximate profile of a trench. We may have bathymetric maps suggesting the shape of a slope or a basin. But to truly see a place on the seafloor, to send cameras there, to illuminate it, to watch the texture of sediment, the arrangement of rocks, the passage of life across it, that is far rarer. Much of Earth's underwater landscape remains, in that sense, only partially translated into human experience. Known but not known intimately, measured but not truly visited, outlined but not fully seen. And perhaps that is why the seafloor continues to feel so quietly mythical. Not because it is fantasy, but because it is real at a scale that exceeds our habits of attention. On land, geography is something we inhabit. In the deep ocean, geography is something we infer, reconstruct, and occasionally glimpse in narrow circles of artificial light. A mountain seen from a submersible window is not like a mountain seen from a valley road. It appears out of darkness piece by piece. A slope, a rock face, a field of sediment, a scattering of animals, the suggestion of upward mass disappearing beyond the beam. The seafloor does not reveal full vistas easily. It offers fragments, local truths, immediate textures. The whole must be imagined from many small encounters. And perhaps that is a fitting way to meet such a place. Slowly, patiently, without pretending that one descent could ever contain it all. So tonight, as we let the hidden landscapes of the ocean gather in the mind, it may help to imagine this. Not merely water below water, but a continent-sized darkness shaped into valleys and ridges. Not emptiness, but architecture. Not a blank underside of the sea, but one of the great terrains of Earth, waiting in silence under immense pressure, holding mountains no one has climbed, plains no one has crossed on foot, and canyons through which no wind has ever blown. A world beneath the world, real, immense, and still only partly introduced to us. If the seafloor were suddenly uncovered, one of its most astonishing features would not be a single trench or isolated mountain, but a continuous system so large it circles the planet like a seam. A slow, restless seam. A place where Earth is not merely preserving old crust, but making new crust. This is the world of the mid-ocean ridges. And though they lie hidden beneath kilometers of water, they form one of the longest mountain systems on Earth. That fact alone feels almost impossible at first. When people think of mountains, they often think of peaks rising into open sky, snow on high ridges, thin air, sharp summits catching morning light. But the planet's great mountain architecture is not only above sea level. Much of it lies underwater, running through the ocean basins in long connected chains, mostly unseen, yet fundamental to the structure of Earth itself. These ridges are not mountains in the ordinary scenic sense. They are geological boundaries, places where tectonic plates slowly move apart, creating openings through which heat from the planet's interior shapes new ocean crust. Not suddenly, not violently all the time, but persistently, quietly in the language of geology. So slowly that a human lifetime can barely feel the motion, yet steadily enough that over millions of years it remakes the face of the Earth. To imagine this well, it helps to let go of human speed. The ridges are not dramatic because they are fast. They are dramatic because they never really stop. They operate on a scale of patience so vast that the planet itself seems to be breathing through them. Rock rises, magma intrudes, crust cools. The seafloor spreads outward, little by little, as if the ocean floor were being stitched and unstitched by forces deeper than weather, deeper than seasons, deeper than civilization itself. This is one of the most beautiful ideas in Earth science. Beneath the dark ocean, the planet is still making itself. Not in some distant past only, but now, at this very moment, somewhere along those hidden ridges, deep below the waves, Earth's crust is parting and renewing in processes so old and so constant that they seem almost beyond ordinary time. And yet they are not beyond it. They are time written slowly in rock. The ridges do not all look the same. Some have central rift valleys, long depressions where the crust is pulling apart. Others rise more smoothly. Some areas are volcanically active. Others are shaped by faulting, cooling, cracking, and the steady outward movement of newly formed crust. Their details vary, but the deeper truth remains. These underwater mountain systems are the places where the seafloor is born. That phrase deserves stillness. The seafloor is born. So often, the ocean floor is imagined as ancient, static, finished. But the mid-ocean ridges remind us that the deep seabed is not merely an old surface resting beneath water. It is part of a living planetary process. New material emerges, cools, hardens, and begins a long, slow journey away from the ridge, carried outward as plates continue their patient motion. In that sense, the seafloor has an age pattern. The youngest crust lies nearest these spreading centers. Farther away, the crust grows older, like memory moving outward from a place of creation. There is something almost tender in that image. A world constantly renewing itself in darkness, where no sunrise reaches, where no human city stands, where no tree roots ever touch the ground, and yet where the architecture of the planet is still being written. The ocean conceals not only strange life, but ongoing creation. And because these ridges lie so deep and so far from ordinary view, they also carry a special kind of mystery. Their existence is known, mapped in broad ways, studied through geology and oceanography. Yet their immense continuity remains difficult for the mind to hold all at once. A mountain range on land can be approached, photographed, crossed. An underwater ridge system extending across the globe must be imagined through fragments, profiles, charts, dives, and data. We know it through pieces. A volcanic outcrop here, a ridge crest there, a mapped corridor of rising seafloor, a vent field, fissure, a sample of basalt cooled from once molten rock. Each piece says the same thing in a different dialect of matter. The earth below the ocean is active. The seafloor is not silent because nothing happens there. It is silent because what happens there often happens without us. That may be one of the most calming truths in the entire story of the ocean. There are processes of immense consequence unfolding continuously beneath the sea, entirely indifferent to whether humans are watching. The planet's deep structure does not require an audience. It simply continues with a patience far older than attention. And from that patience come extraordinary consequences. The movement of plates shapes ocean basins. It influences earthquakes and volcanism. It builds and rearranges underwater terrain. It helps create the conditions for hydrothermal systems, where heated water rich in minerals can emerge from the crust and support remarkable ecosystems. The ridges are not isolated curiosities. They are organizing lines in the deep architecture of Earth. Yet despite all this power, there is something gentle in the way we must imagine them tonight. Not as catastrophe, not as spectacle, but as motion too slow for panic, motion too deep for ordinary sight, motion that belongs to the planet's oldest rhythms. If continents are the visible pages of Earth's story, then the mid-ocean ridges are part of the binding, mostly hidden, structurally essential, holding the book together while the surface world turns through weather, history, and human noise. And perhaps that is why they feel so profound in a sleep story, because they restore a larger scale. They remind us that beneath the temporary things, the news, the schedules, the glowing screens, the small urgencies of a given day, there exists a deeper tempo, a tempo in which mountains form underwater, in which rock emerges from the planet's interior and cools in blackness, in which entire ocean floors drift apart by fractions so tiny they would seem meaningless to daily life, and yet over ages they redraw the world. To rest with that thought is to feel time soften. The ridges do not hurry. They do not need to. Their work is patient enough to outlast empires, patient enough to reshape seas, patient enough to let the earth seem, for a moment, not like a fixed object, but like a living body adjusting itself very slowly in sleep. A long breathing seam beneath the ocean, a hidden mountain chain where the planet quietly opens, cools, and renews. And somewhere above it, on the bright surface world, ships pass, clouds drift, and the day continues, mostly unaware that far below, in darkness and pressure, the Earth is still making new ground. There are places in the ocean where the seafloor does not simply slope downward. It falls. It bends into the earth in long, narrow descents so deep that language begins to feel insufficient. These are the trenches, the deepest known places on the planet, where the ocean floor curves into immense shadowed depressions and the weight of water above becomes almost beyond intuitive thought. If the mid-ocean ridges feel like the seams where Earth slowly opens, trenches feel like the places where Earth folds inward. They are not random holes. They are part of the planet's deeper architecture, formed where tectonic forces draw one slab of crust beneath another. The seabed in these regions does not merely continue across the ocean basin, plunges, and that plunge creates some of the most extreme environments on Earth. To imagine a trench is to imagine depth layered upon depth. The ordinary sea already feels deep to the human mind. A coastal drop-off can feel mysterious. A dark blue channel can feel bottomless from the deck of a boat. Even a few hundred meters of water exceeds the scale of everyday life. But trenches belong to another category entirely. They are places where the ocean gathers itself into profound vertical distance, where the seafloor retreats so far below the surface that the space between top and bottom seems almost abstract. If one could somehow remove the water and stand beside such a depression, the scale would likely feel geological in a way few human landscapes do. Not merely large, but difficult to emotionally process. And yet, even here, the trench is not empty. That may be the first truth worth holding. The deepest parts of the ocean are not voids waiting to be filled by imagination. They are real environments with sediments, chemistry, currents, microbes, scavengers, strange small animals, and geological processes continuing in darkness. Life, once again, refuses the assumptions we might make from comfort and sunlight. The trench is severe, yes. Pressure there becomes immense. Cold remains constant. Food is limited and precious. The terrain can be unstable, steep, and difficult to study. But the trench is still part of the living earth. That is one of the most humbling lessons of the deep sea. Where the human body sees impossibility, life often finds a narrow and patient path. There is something almost sacred about the stillness one imagines in these depths. Not silence in the complete absence of sound, because the ocean is never truly without motion or vibration, but a kind of visual silence. No daylight, no horizon, no familiar sky, just darkness layered over darkness, with the seafloor lying under pressure so great that every organism there belongs to an order of endurance far removed from ordinary human experience. The deepest trench environments can feel, in the mind, like the farthest rooms of Earth. Not far in distance across the planet, but far in condition, far in atmosphere, far in accessibility, far in the strangeness of what it means to exist there at all. And yet these rooms are still inside our own world. That may be the most beautiful part. You do not need to leave Earth to find environments more extreme than imagination naturally supplies. Earth has made them already, beneath its own oceans, hidden under miles of water, where the crust bends down and the sea follows. Because trenches are so difficult to reach, they also carry a special aura in the history of exploration. They are places humans have measured, mapped in part, sampled carefully, and visited only rarely. To descend into one of the deepest zones is not like visiting a beach, a reef, or even much of the continental slope. It is a technical act of extraordinary care. The journey downward takes time. The environment offers no forgiveness for weak engineering. The darkness is complete. The pressure is relentless. And the seafloor, when it finally appears in light, does not arrive with fanfare. It emerges quietly, sediment, rock, contour, the pale body of a creature moving through the beam, a reminder that the deepest place on Earth is still, in the end, a place. Not a myth, not a symbol only, a place with texture, a place with material presence, a place where gravity, chemistry, and life continue their work without needing to be seen. This is part of what makes trenches so soothing to contemplate at night, despite their extremity. They restore proportion. They remind us that the Earth is deeper than our daily scale, older than our concerns, and still holding regions that exist almost entirely beyond the theater of ordinary human life. Beneath commerce, beneath weather, beneath coastlines and shipping routes and satellite views, there are these long, dark, curving descents where the planet quietly keeps some of its oldest silences. In the trench, time itself can feel different. Sediments may settle slowly. Organic matter may drift downward from far above. Creatures may live in patterns shaped by scarcity, pressure, and patience. Geological processes continue on scales no human nervous system is built to feel directly. Everything invites slowness. Nothing belongs to hurry. And perhaps that is why the mind softens around these depths instead of recoiling from them, at least in the calm space of imagination. A trench is not only an abyss, it is also a stillness, a place where excess falls away. No bright colors from sunlight, no busy coastal noise, no visual clutter, only darkness, depth, and the quiet persistence of reality under immense conditions. The word deepest can sometimes make people think of competition, as if trenches matter because they win some planetary contest of measurement. But their deeper importance is not just that they are the lowest points. It is that they reveal what kind of world Earth truly is. A world with interior motion. A world whose surface is not a finished shell but a shifting structure. A world where the ocean does not simply rest on top, but enters into the architecture of tectonic change. A world where the farthest downward reaches are inhabited, studied only with difficulty, and still capable of surprising us. Even the names we give to trenches cannot fully domesticate them. A name can place a label on a map, but it does not lessen the darkness or the pressure or the mystery. It does not make the place small. It simply gives the human mind a handle to hold while facing something that remains, in truth, much larger than naming. So tonight, as we drift in thought through these deepest places, it may help to imagine them not as frightening gulfs, but as the ocean's most profound gestures downward. Long hidden curves in the earth, rooms of pressure and patience, places where light never arrives, but life and geology still go on. Places that do not ask to be conquered, only understood a little more gently, a little more slowly with each rare descent. And far above them, the surface sea continues to shine under the sun, as though nothing extraordinary lies beneath. But it does. Miles below that brightness, in trenches cut into the structure of the planet itself, the ocean becomes deeper than nearly any human feeling can follow, and still remains quietly, undeniably real. In the ordinary world above the sea, almost every living system begins with sunlight. Light touches leaves. Leaves make sugar. Energy moves outward through roots, bodies, teeth, wings, fins, and breath. Even when animals eat one another, and even when food webs become tangled and complex, the chain usually starts with the sun. It is the great opening gift of the surface world, so familiar that it can seem almost invisible in our thinking. Of course, life begins with light, we assume. Of course, warmth and brightness come first. And then the deep ocean offers another possibility. Far below the reach of the sun, in darkness that no dawn can enter, there are places where life gathers not around light, but around heat and chemistry rising from the earth itself. These are hydrothermal vents, and they remain one of the most beautiful surprises in all of science. If the deep sea has already taught us that darkness is not emptiness, hydrothermal vents take the lesson one step further. They show that life can do more than survive without sunlight. In the right conditions, it can organize itself into rich communities around entirely different sources of energy. To imagine a vent field, it helps first to imagine the seafloor not as still and sealed, but as part of a restless planet. Along certain tectonic regions, seawater seeps down into cracks in the oceanic crust. There, deep below the seabed, it meets hot rock and becomes heated, altered, charged with dissolved minerals. Eventually, that water rises again and emerges back into the ocean through openings in the seafloor. What returns is no ordinary flow. Can be hot, mineral-rich, chemically potent, a fluid shaped by contact with the deep interior of the earth. When this venting water enters the cold ocean around it, minerals can precipitate out, building chimney-like structures and strange towers over time, as though the seafloor were quietly growing dark underwater architecture from heat and dissolved stone. The visual contrast is astonishing. Black water-like plumes rising into blackness. Pale mineral formations lifting from the seafloor. White, gray, rust-colored, or dark chimneys standing in the deep. And around them, life. Not scattered sparsely in the way people once imagined the deep sea might be, but gathered, clustered, thriving in patterns that seem at first almost impossible. This is the deep wonder of vents. They are oases, but not in the ordinary desert sense. They are oases of chemistry. Instead of sunlight fueling photosynthesis, certain microbes at these vents use chemical compounds from vent fluids to produce energy in a process called chemosynthesis. It is a quiet word for a revolutionary idea. Life in these settings does not begin with the sun overhead. It begins with chemical energy rising from below. That realization changed more than marine biology. It changed the human imagination. Because once it became clear that ecosystems could be built on chemistry rather than sunlight, the deep sea no longer seemed like a dim extension of the surface world. It became proof that life can invent other foundations, other beginnings, other ways to make a living in the dark. And those microbial beginnings do not remain microscopic in significance. Around vents, they support larger communities. Tube worms, clams, mussels, shrimp, crabs, fish, and other creatures specially adapted to these extraordinary settings. Some depend directly on symbiotic microbes living within their tissues. Others graze, scavenge, or prey in food webs rooted in vent chemistry. The result is one of the strangest and most moving scenes in the ocean. A seafloor otherwise dark and cold, then suddenly a place of activity. Bodies clustered around vent openings, mineral towers steaming into black water, life arranged around heat rising from the earth itself. It feels almost mythic when first imagined, like a hidden city at the bottom of the world. But it is not myth. It is geology and biology meeting in exact, physical, astonishing reality. There is something deeply calming in that meeting. The Earth is not only a place where life clings to the surface under sunlight. It is also a place where the interior planet and the outer ocean touch one another in ways that allow living systems to bloom in darkness. Heat from within, cold water from above, minerals, microbes, adaptation, time. Out of this meeting comes abundance in a realm that once seemed likely to be barren. And yet, vent life is not merely a miracle of abundance. It is also a lesson in precision. These are not easy environments. Vent fluids can be chemically extreme. Temperatures can vary dramatically over short distances. Conditions can change as vents age, shift, weaken, or shut down. The seafloor here is active, and active places are not always stable places. So vent communities often exist in a balance of opportunity and risk. Life flourishes there because of the chemistry, but must also endure the volatility that comes with it. This makes vents feel less like paradise and more like frontier settlements in the deep, rich, temporary in some cases, dependent on the ongoing pulse of the earth beneath them. And because of that, they carry a peculiar kind of beauty, not the beauty of still perfection, but the beauty of improbable persistence. Life finding a foothold in black water around hot stone. Life making use of what the planet offers, even in places where no human instinct would think to look for nourishment. There is also a philosophical softness to vents. They remind us that what seems essential from one point of view may be provincial from another. Sunlight feels universal because it governs so much of the world we know. But the vents say, perhaps not everything living needs the world arranged the way humans expect. Perhaps there are more ways to build a home in the universe than the familiar ones. That idea reaches outward, of course, beyond the ocean. But even here on Earth, it is enough to deepen wonder. In the deep sea, hidden under miles of water, life has already shown us that darkness is not the end of possibility. It is simply the beginning of another kind. And if we imagine approaching a hydrothermal vent in a submersible, the scene becomes even more dreamlike. The lights cut through blackness. The seafloor appears. A chimney looms upward. Mineral particles drift in the water. Creatures cluster where chemistry sustains them. Beyond the beam, darkness remains complete. The little lit world feels intense, local, self-contained. A pocket of hidden abundance in a much larger unseen expanse. That contrast is part of the vent's power. It does not illuminate the whole deep ocean, only a small area, only enough to show that where the right conditions gather, life can become unexpectedly rich. A lesson in small circles of possibility. A lesson in how much can exist beyond what is easily visible. So tonight, as we rest near these hidden seafloor springs in thought, we might carry one gentle realization with us. The deep ocean is not only dark, it is creative, not only quiet, but generative. In places where the earth releases heat and chemistry into the sea, life answers. Not with noise, not with spectacle for our sake, but with patient, intimate flourishing. A community built without sunlight, a living arrangement born from rock, water, minerals, and time. And in that darkness, around those venting chimneys, the planet reveals one of its most tender secrets. Even where the sun does not reach, life can still find a way to glow from hidden sources below. In the deep ocean, where sunlight does not arrive, light has not disappeared. It has changed authors. Instead of pouring down from a distant star, it is made quietly within living bodies. A pulse in the dark, a shimmer under pressure, a brief blue-green signal passing through black water where no morning has ever entered. This is bioluminescence, one of the most delicate and astonishing languages in the sea. If the surface ocean belongs to reflected light, the deep ocean often belongs to living light. And what a strange, gentle idea that is. The darkest inhabited places on Earth are not entirely dark after all. They are scattered with tiny acts of illumination, flashes and glows created by creatures whose lives unfold far below the reach of the sun. Some shine for an instant like a thought. Some glow steadily for longer. Some produce points of light so subtle they may seem almost imaginary unless seen directly in the blackness around them. The effect, by all accounts, can be mesmerizing. Not bright in the way cities are bright. Not even bright in the way moonlight on water is bright. But intimate, precise, like stars if stars were alive and drifting in slow silence around you. Bioluminescence is not decoration in the deep sea. It is function, a practical beauty, a living technology shaped by evolution over immense spans of time. Chemicals within the body react in ways that release light, and that light can be used for many purposes: to attract prey, to confuse predators, to communicate, to find a mate, to blend in, to startle, to warn, to lure, to vanish by appearing not darker, but perfectly matched to the faint light above. That last one is among the most elegant. Some animals in dim ocean layers produce light on the undersides of their bodies in patterns that help erase their silhouettes when seen from below. A predator looking upward might expect to find the dark shape of a fish against the weak downwelling glow. But instead, the fish shines softly enough to merge with that glow, becoming harder to detect. It is camouflaged by light, not hiding in shadow, but hiding in illumination. The ocean has many such quiet masterpieces, and bioluminescence is only one part of a broader strangeness in deep-sea bodies. Because if life in darkness is going to work, form itself must adapt. So many deep-sea creatures seem to have been shaped by conditions that favor subtlety, efficiency, and surprise. Some are transparent, as though the body has become almost an absence. Some are gelatinous, soft enough to seem more like drifting thought than flesh. Some have oversized eyes built to gather the slightest hint of brightness. Others have reduced eyes or unusual sensory systems because sight is no longer the only reliable guide. Some wear their mouths like traps. Some trail luminous lures. Some carry delicate fins that wave almost invisibly through the water. To human eyes, these bodies can seem alien, but perhaps alien is not quite the right word. They are not from elsewhere. They are deeply, exquisitely from here, from Earth, from pressure, darkness, cold, and long evolutionary experimentation in a hidden environment. What looks strange from the surface often makes perfect sense in the deep. A transparent body may be harder to see. A soft body may suit buoyancy and pressure better than a rigid one. A large mouth may reflect the unpredictability of food. A lure may solve the problem of attracting life through darkness. The deep sea does not produce bizarre forms for spectacle. It produces forms that work. And because the environment is so different from our own, success can look wonderfully unfamiliar. There is something soothing about that. The deep ocean does not ask creatures to resemble the surface world. It allows other solutions, other silhouettes, other textures of being alive. And in that allowance, beauty becomes wider than habit. A jelly drifting with quiet pulses can be beautiful. A fish with a lantern-like organ can be beautiful. A chain of glowing siphonophores stretching through the dark like living glass can be beautiful. Beauty in the deep is often not warm or lush or obvious. It is spare, luminous, precise, a kind of elegance made for darkness. It is also worth pausing over how different the deep sea's relationship to appearance really is. On land, visibility shapes so much of life. Color can announce danger or health or desire. Movement can be seen from a distance. A body's outline exists in open air, legible under daylight. But in the deep ocean, appearance must function in a world where visibility is partial, directional, and often extremely limited. A creature may only be visible at the exact moment it intersects a beam of light, a pulse of luminescence, or the gaze of an eye adapted to darkness. This makes the deep sea a world of selective revelation. Nothing is fully on display. Bodies are glimpsed. Signals are brief. Contours emerge and vanish. Even when explorers descend with cameras and lights, they do not suddenly flood the whole environment with understanding. They illuminate a drifting patch of reality, and from that patch they try to infer the larger life around them. So when a deep-sea animal appears in front of a lens, it can feel less like finding an object and more like receiving a visitation. A momentary permission to see what usually remains hidden. A soft-bodied animal moving through blackness. A tiny constellation of blue lights. A transparent bell pulsing once, twice, then dissolving back into dark water. This is why footage from the deep often lingers in the mind differently than scenes from the surface ocean. Shallow coral reefs may dazzle with color and abundance. The deep enchants by restraint, by the way it gives only a little, by the way each revealed form feels improbable and exact, as though it has been shaped not only by biology but by silence itself. And perhaps this is part of why the deep sea is so comforting in a bedtime story. These creatures do not shout for attention. They drift. They pulse. They glow softly when needed. They belong to a world where excess is expensive, where energy is precious, and where beauty often arrives in the smallest possible light. Even fear softens there if we let it. Because yes, some deep-sea animals have been described in frightening ways by the surface imagination. Teeth become monstrous. Darkness becomes threat. Unfamiliar anatomy becomes horror. But that is often the language of human discomfort, not the truth of the animal's life. A large jaw in the deep may simply be practicality. A lure may be efficiency. A strange face may be what survival looks like under pressure and scarcity. To the creature itself, there is no monster, only adaptation, only living, only the quiet work of belonging to its environment. And that may be one of the gentlest lessons bioluminescent life can offer us. What seems eerie from afar may be perfectly at peace within its own conditions. So tonight, as we drift deeper into this hidden world, let us imagine the ocean not as a black void, but as a dark cathedral scattered with living signals. A brief glow here, a thread of blue there, a body nearly invisible until it catches the light it makes itself. Not brightness enough to conquer the dark, only enough to live inside it beautifully, and perhaps that is more moving than daylight ever could be. Because in the deep ocean, where sunlight is absent and the world might seem abandoned to shadow, life has done something tender and extraordinary. It has learned to carry its own small lights. Every evening, as daylight begins to loosen its hold on the surface of the sea, a great movement begins. Not with noise, not with a visible line crossing the horizon, not with the thundering certainty of hooves or wings. It begins in darkness, in layers of water most people will never see, as countless small creatures start to rise. Upward, slowly, steadily, in numbers so immense that the event is considered one of the largest migrations on Earth. And yet it happens almost entirely out of sight. This is the Great Vertical Migration, a daily journey measured not in miles across continents, but in distance through water. Not from north to south or coast to coast, but from depth toward the surface, and then back down again before the return of day. There is something immediately soothing about that pattern. Each night, ascent. Each morning, descent. A pulse of life tied not to roads or seasons, but to light, or rather to the fading of light. Many animals that spend the day in deeper, dimmer waters begin rising after sunset toward the more food-rich layers above. Under the cover of darkness, the upper ocean becomes safer. The risk of being seen by predators is reduced. The surface layers, rich with plankton and other nourishment, become accessible. Then, when dawn approaches and light begins returning to the water, many of these same creatures sink again into the darker depths below. It is a rhythm both ancient and ongoing, a choreography performed every day across much of the global ocean. And because so many of the participants are small, tiny fish, crustaceans, jellies, squid, and drifting organisms that might fit easily in the hand or be far too delicate to hold at all, the migration can be easy to underestimate in imagination. But small does not mean minor. When multiplied by astonishing abundance, the effect becomes planetary. Billions upon billions of living bodies moving through the water column, rising and falling with the cycle of light and darkness. A hidden tide made not of water, but of life itself. This is one of the most beautiful truths of the ocean. Vastness is not always expressed through size alone. Sometimes it is expressed through number, through repetition, through tiny bodies acting together in patterns so widespread that the whole planet participates. To imagine it properly, it helps to release the idea of the ocean as static layers stacked one above another. The sea is not simply divided into fixed floors of activity. It breathes with movement. At dusk, the deeper waters become a place of departure. At dawn, a place of return. The twilight and upper layers fill and empty in gentle cycles, though gentle does not mean insignificant. These daily journeys matter deeply to the structure of ocean ecosystems. They help connect deep waters to surface waters. They move energy through the sea. Creatures feed near the surface and transport nutrients and carbon downward when they return to depth. The migration is not only a marvel of behavior, It is part of the ocean's living machinery. And still, for all its importance, it remains mostly invisible to ordinary human life. A person standing on a beach at sunset may see nothing unusual. The sky changes color, waves fold in, perhaps seabirds cross overhead. Perhaps the sea grows darker and more reflective as night settles. But beneath that calm, darkening surface, immense numbers of animals are beginning their ascent, responding to fading light with a precision shaped over evolutionary time. There is something almost musical in that. Not music of sound exactly, though the sea surely has its own acoustic textures, but music in the sense of timing. An entrance on cue, a recurring movement, a pattern so reliable that whole bodies and nervous systems have been tuned to it. For many of these creatures, the light itself is the signal. They do not need clocks in the human sense. They read the sea, they feel the dimming, they respond to the changing brightness above, and the ocean fills with vertical motion. It is a reminder that darkness is not simply the absence of day. It is an event, condition with meaning, permission, and for the creatures of the migration, night is not emptiness, but opportunity. That may be why this phenomenon feels so poetic in a sleep story, because it reverses the usual human symbolism. On land, darkness is often imagined as a time of withdrawal, stillness, and retreat. But in the ocean, darkness can also be the time when life rises, when hidden communities move upward into richer waters, when the sea becomes more active in ways the eye above cannot detect. Night in the ocean is not always quieter. Sometimes it is fuller, and yet fullness here is soft, not crowded in the way a city is crowded, not loud in the way a storm is loud, full through drift and motion and invisible company, a dark sea with multitudes rising inside it. There is also a practical tenderness to the migration. The creatures involved are not making grand journeys for beauty. They are feeding, surviving, avoiding predation, responding to ancient selective pressures that have shaped them into participants in this nightly exchange. Many spend the day deeper down because visibility is dangerous. In darkness, they can move upward with less risk. Then, before daylight exposes them again, they retreat. So the migration is also a story about vulnerability, about the use of darkness not as fear, but as shelter, about small lives making careful use of time and depth to remain alive in a sea full of hunters and uncertainty. That gentleness matters, because so much of the ocean's wonder comes not from dominance, but from adjustment, not from force, but from timing. The great vertical migration is not spectacular because one mighty animal commands it. It is spectacular because countless modest beings participate in it together, each doing something simple: rise in darkness, feed, return before light. And from those simple acts emerges one of the grand recurring patterns of the planet. Science has learned of this migration through observation, nets, acoustics, and patient study. At times, sonar has revealed dense layers of life moving up and down through the water column, almost like living clouds. There were even moments in the history of oceanography when these moving layers confused early observers, seeming at first like a false seafloor because the concentration of organisms was so great. Imagine that: life so abundant and so coordinated in depth that instruments briefly mistook it for terrain. A false bottom made not of rock, but of bodies. That image lingers, because it captures the density of unseen life in the ocean. It reminds us again that the sea is not mostly empty water with occasional animals in it. It is structured by hidden abundance, by layers of movement and interaction unfolding constantly beneath the surface. And in the migration, that hidden abundance becomes dynamic in the most graceful possible way. Not a rush, not a panic, a nightly unfolding, a rise into darkness, fall into day. So tonight, as we rest inside this blue-black world of thought, let the great vertical migration become one more soft pulse in the story of the sea. Imagine the upper ocean darkening after sunset. Imagine countless small bodies beginning to ascend through dim water, transparent, silvered, faintly luminous, nearly invisible. Imagine the vast hidden traffic of life moving upward while above. The stars appear one by one over the surface. And then, hours later, imagine dawn beginning to return. The first suggestion of brightness filtering down. And with it, the long, slow descent. Back into safety, back into shadow, back into the deeper layers where day becomes only a distant pressure of light overhead. A migration without footprints. A journey without roads, one of the largest on Earth, repeated every night beneath the sea, as if the ocean itself were breathing in living tides. In the deep ocean, seeing is only part of knowing, and often it is not even the most important part. For creatures living in darkness, in dim blue water, or across vast distances where visibility is limited, the ocean is not primarily a world of sharp outlines and far horizons. It is a world carried by pressure waves, vibrations, echoes, pulses, and low distant calls. A world heard more than seen. This alone changes the feeling of the sea. On land, sight tends to dominate. We orient by edges, by contrast, by light falling across surfaces. A tree is known by its shape against the sky. A road unfolds ahead of the eyes. Even sound, though powerful, often feels secondary to the visible arrangement of things. But underwater, that balance shifts. Light weakens quickly. Objects disappear into haze or darkness. Distance becomes difficult to judge, and sound, in many cases, travels remarkably well. So the ocean becomes a place where information can move through water in ways that feel almost magical from the human perspective. A call can travel far. A click can return as an echo. A distant movement can create vibration. A creature may remain unseen and still be vividly present in the acoustic texture of the sea. This means the ocean is not only a hidden landscape, it is also a listening world. For whales, this is perhaps easiest for us to imagine. A whale does not need a visible horizon to sense the vastness around it. Through sound, the ocean opens. Calls can move through great distances. Communication can happen far beyond the range of sight. The sea, to such animals, is not merely dark water with occasional nearby shapes. It is an enormous resonant medium, full of signals traveling outward through depth. There is something deeply soothing in that idea, that the blackness of the ocean is not silence. That darkness does not mean isolation, that even where sight fails, the sea is still full of contact. A call answered far away, a click returning from an object in the dark, a body moving through water known by the disturbance it creates. In this sense, sound gives the ocean another kind of intimacy. Vision separates by distance. It places things over there, at the far edge of the visible world. But sound can wrap around, can pass through darkness. It can arrive from outside the beam of light, outside the visible frame, and still carry meaning. A creature need not be seen to be part of the surrounding world. And so the deep sea, though visually sparse, is not empty of presence. It is alive with what can be heard, felt, detected, inferred. Many marine animals use sound in different ways. Some call to communicate. Some listen for prey or predators. Some use echolocation, producing sounds and interpreting their return to build an acoustic sense of their environment. Even creatures that do not hear in the human sense may still respond to vibration, pressure changes, and movement through the water around them. The ocean, then, is not simply full of voices. It is full of sensing, a medium where perception itself has expanded beyond the narrow primacy of sight. This can be difficult for humans to picture because we are so visually trained. We often imagine understanding as something like illumination. Shine a light, reveal a shape, solve the mystery. But the ocean teaches a gentler lesson. Sometimes understanding comes through echo, through timing, through listening patiently for what returns. That is true for animals, and it is true for science. Much of what humans know about the hidden seafloor has come not from looking directly, but from sending sound downward and listening for its return. Sonar has allowed us to map underwater terrain, reveal ridges and trenches, detect schools of fish, and build images of places human eyes have never seen in person. Pulse goes out, an answer comes back. From that exchange, shape emerges. There is something almost poetic in this. To learn the hidden world by asking it to echo, to map the unseen by listening, to discover valleys, slopes, mountains, and moving layers of life through sound, traveling into darkness and returning as information. It makes exploration feel less like conquest and more like conversation. The ocean does not give up its form immediately. It answers in echoes, and those echoes must be interpreted with care. Even on smaller scales, sound and vibration matter profoundly. Shrimp snapping, fish producing grunts, hums, knocks, or pulses, mammals singing or calling, ice shifting in polar waters, rain striking the surface, waves breaking above, currents brushing structures. The ocean is not a silent void. It is a layered acoustic world where natural sounds overlap in intricate textures. At times, one might imagine it like weather for the ears. Low rumbles in one region, sharp clicks in another, long sustained calls passing through cold water, tiny crackling noises from living communities. The sea as an orchestra heard from within, though no single listener could ever absorb it all. And unlike the surface world, where sound often feels interrupted by walls, air, and distance, the ocean can carry acoustic information in ways that give even remote events a strange nearness. Something far away may still arrive as vibration. Something hidden by darkness may still become knowable by sound. A body may remain invisible and yet never be absent. This matters emotionally as much as scientifically, because it changes what darkness means. On land, darkness can feel like subtraction. The visible world disappears, and uncertainty rises with it. But in the ocean, darkness is accompanied by another possibility. When sight withdraws, hearing becomes richer. The world does not vanish. It rearranges itself around another sense. That can be a comforting thought for sleep. Not everything must be brightly lit to be real. Not everything must be fully visible to be understood. Some things arrive more softly, as rhythm, as resonance, as faint information carried through a medium that remembers motion. Whales embody this beautifully. Their calls can feel like long threads pulled through the ocean's body. Some are haunting, some simple, some patterned, some almost like songs in the way they repeat and shift. Whatever their exact purpose in a given moment, they remind us that the sea is not mute. It contains expression on scales humans rarely experience directly. A whale calling in dark water is one of the great images of Earth. A voice moving through blackness, not to perform, not to reassure us, simply because that is how life reaches outward there. And perhaps the same is true in smaller ways for countless other creatures. The deep ocean does not depend on spectacle. It depends on contact, on the ability to detect what cannot be seen, on sensing shape through echo, direction through signal, presence through vibration. So the sea becomes, in a sense, a world of invisible touch at a distance. And humans, when we explore it, must learn to join that world humbly. We lower hydrophones. We listen to soundscapes. We map with sonar. We interpret the ocean not only through cameras and lights, but through acoustics. Even our science becomes more patient there, more receptive, more aware that reality may speak first through echoes rather than images. Tonight, as we continue drifting through this hidden blue planet, it may help to imagine the deep ocean not as a blank black space, but as a resonant one. A place where whales send long notes into darkness, where clicking animals navigate by return, where ridges and seamounts are discovered by sound, where even the unseen leaves a trace. The sea does not always reveal itself to the eye, but it is never entirely without voice. And in that vast dark water, where so much remains beyond sight, the world continues to announce itself gently, patiently, in waves of sound moving through the deep. When humans explore the deep ocean, we do not enter it the way we enter a forest path or a mountain trail. We do not simply arrive. We prepare. We calculate. We build. We lower instruments slowly into darkness and wait for the sea to answer. This is one of the quiet differences between ocean exploration and almost every other kind of exploration we imagine. The deep does not allow casual presence. It requires mediation. Machines become our stand-ins, our lanterns, our patient mechanical senses moving where the human body cannot safely remain. So much of what we know about the unseen ocean has come not from direct encounter in the ordinary sense, but from tools. And there is something beautiful about that. Not because tools make the sea less mysterious, but because they reveal how much humility is built into the act of looking. We do not stride into the abyss as masters. We send small questions downward. A pulse of sound, a camera inside a pressure-proof shell, a remotely guided vehicle with lights like cautious eyes, an instrument package drifting through darkness, recording temperature, salinity, oxygen, movement, a sampler touching sediment that no human hand has ever reached. In this way, ocean exploration often feels less like conquest and more like listening at the door of a vast hidden room. One of the oldest and most important methods is mapping by sound. Since the seafloor cannot usually be seen from the surface, ships use sonar to send pulses downward and measure the returning echoes. Over time, From countless passes across the ocean, those echoes become maps. Shapes begin to emerge. A ridge here, a canyon there, a slope, a basin, a volcanic rise, a trench descending farther than expected. What the eye cannot see through miles of water, sound can begin to outline. And so the hidden topography of the planet has been assembled gradually, strip by strip, line by line, as if humanity were sketching the dark with echoes. There is something wonderfully patient in that image. A ship crossing open sea, a signal dropping into blackness, a return, then another, and another, the map growing not in a single dramatic revelation, but in thousands of careful, repeated acts of measurement. Then there are the vehicles themselves. Some are remotely operated, connected to a ship above by a tether through which power, commands, and video signals can travel. These machines descend where humans cannot easily go, carrying cameras, lights, robotic arms, and instruments. They move slowly over the seafloor, hovering above sediments, approaching rock faces, examining coral, vent chimneys, strange animals, and fields of darkness broken only by the beam of their lamps. A remotely operated vehicle is, in some ways, a strange extension of the human nervous system. Hands at the surface move controls. Far below, metal arms respond. Eyes on a ship watch video from a place they are not physically standing. The deep is touched at a distance, seen at a distance, handled gently through cables and machines, and still it remains deeply real. Other vehicles travel more independently. Autonomous systems move without a constant tether, following programmed routes through the water column or across the seafloor. They can map broad areas, collect environmental data, and go where long direct control from a ship might be difficult. Some glide, some dive and rise repeatedly. Some survey regions of the ocean with a steadiness that feels almost meditative, carrying sensors through darkness hour after hour. If the tethered vehicle is like an outstretched hand, the autonomous one is more like a trusted messenger, sent out with instructions, returning later with memory. Then there are submersibles, the rare vessels that carry people down into the deep itself. These are perhaps the most emotionally powerful machines in ocean exploration, not because they are always the most efficient, but because they place human presence directly inside the descent. A small cabin, thick walls, instruments glowing softly, viewports opening onto black water. The long, slow sinking, the sense of leaving the sunlit world behind and entering a part of Earth where ordinary life cannot follow. Inside a submersible, the human body is protected, but never fully separated from the seriousness of the environment. The vessel becomes a small island of air and warmth and breathable pressure moving through cold darkness. Every observation from inside it feels intimate because the observer is truly there, even if held inside engineering. That intimacy matters. To see the deep with one's own eyes, through a window rather than only through a screen, is a rare form of encounter. And yet, even then, the submersible does not flood the deep with understanding. Its lights reveal a limited circle. Its motion is slow. Its visit is brief. Beyond the beam, darkness remains vast and untroubled. So even our most direct visits to the deep are modest in scale. We never take the whole ocean in at once. We see one patch of seafloor, one drifting body, one chimney at a vent field, one ridge wall, one cluster of animals moving through darkness. The rest remains outside the frame. Sensors are another quiet triumph of exploration. Some instruments measure temperature and salinity through the water column. Others record pressure, oxygen, currents, chemistry, particles, or sound. Some are lowered from ships on cables. Some are left in place for long periods, anchored in the sea to watch conditions change over time. Some drift with currents, gathering information as they go. These devices do not give us dramatic images. They give something just as valuable: pattern, context, the slow truth of measurement. A warming here, current there, an oxygen minimum zone, a chemical plume, a seasonal change, a pulse of productivity, a hidden process that only becomes visible because an instrument waited long enough to notice it. There is a quiet nobility in that waiting. Instruments do something profoundly unhuman in the best possible way. They remain attentive for long stretches without boredom. They witness slowly. They gather what passes. They make it possible for us to understand the ocean not as a single scene, but as a continuing system. Sampling tools matter too. Sediment cores lifted from the seafloor can preserve records of long environmental history. Water samples reveal chemistry and microscopic life. Nets, carefully used, have helped scientists understand drifting organisms, migrations, and community structure in layers of the sea that would otherwise remain almost invisible. Robotic arms can pick up rock, biological specimens, or small objects from the seabed, each sample becoming a tiny physical message from a place most people will never visit. And every one of these tools shares the same deeper purpose: to extend perception, to reach beyond the natural limits of the human body, to let us ask questions of a world that is physically real but not physically accessible in ordinary ways. In this sense, oceanography is one of the most quietly imaginative sciences. It requires engineering, yes, physics, mathematics, materials, navigation, patience, immense logistics, but also imagination, because before a tool is built, someone must ask, how can we know what is there? How can we listen to a hidden ridge? How can we film a creature in black water? How can we collect a sample from a plane no one has walked? How can we make a machine survive pressure that would crush almost anything familiar? These are not only technical questions. They are questions born from wonder. And perhaps that is why the tools of ocean exploration feel so moving in a sleep story. They are not loud answers. They are careful attempts. Little lanterns lowered into immensity. Every map, every camera feed, every sensor record, every sample is a fragment of relationship between human curiosity and a world larger than direct human reach. So tonight, as we drift onward, imagine the ocean not only as darkness and mystery, but as a place touched by these delicate acts of attention. A ship above, a cable unwinding, a vehicle descending, lights entering black water, a sonar pulse traveling downward and returning as shape, a sensor waiting quietly in the deep, a machine crossing the seafloor with patient eyes, not conquering, not claiming, only looking, only asking, only carrying a little circle of human curiosity into one of Earth's oldest, darkest rooms. By now, it may be tempting to imagine that exploring the ocean is one single act, as if a place is either known or unknown, mapped or unmapped, seen or unseen. But the ocean does not divide itself so neatly. To understand the hidden sea, we have to let go of the idea that exploration arrives all at once. Because in the ocean, to map a place is not necessarily to visit it. To visit it is not necessarily to understand it. To understand one feature is not to understand the wider system around it. And to glimpse something once is not the same as knowing how it changes through time. This is why ocean mapping is such a patient science. It happens in layers. A first broad pass might tell us depth. A later survey might sharpen the contours. A dive might reveal the texture of the seafloor. A sample might explain the chemistry. A long-term instrument might show that the place changes with seasons, currents, tectonic activity, or the slow drift of life through darkness. So when we speak of an unexplored ocean, we are often speaking not of absolute ignorance, but of incomplete relationship. The seafloor may be outlined, but not detailed. Detailed, but not visually seen. Seen, but only once. Visited, but only narrowly. Known in one sense and still mysterious in another. There is something deeply calming in that, because it reminds us that knowledge can be gradual without being weak. A map does not need to be finished to be meaningful. Can be a beginning, a first careful sentence in a very long conversation. Most people, when they think of maps, imagine something final and clean. A road map, a globe, borders, coastlines, elevations, labels. Maps on land can feel settled because we are so used to them. We forget how much effort and time went into creating them, and how long humans lived with partial or inaccurate versions before greater detail arrived. But the seafloor remains in an earlier stage of that process, not because no one has tried, but because the scale is immense, the methods are slow, and the environment makes every act of measurement harder than it would be on land. A ship must cross open ocean carefully, often along deliberate lines, sending sound downward over and over again. Multi-beam sonar can map swaths of seafloor beneath the vessel, but even with advanced tools, the ocean is vast enough that coverage takes time. A single expedition may add important detail to a region, yet still represent only a tiny fraction of the whole planetary seabed. That is why mapping can feel almost monastic in its patience. The ship moves, the instrument listens, the bottom answers, again, again, again. One quiet strip at a time. The phrase matters, one quiet strip at a time, because it captures the true mood of the work. Not a dramatic unveiling of the whole ocean, not a curtain pulled back in one motion, but a careful accumulation of narrow bands of knowledge, stitched together over time into wider understanding. This method has a kind of dignity to it. It accepts the size of the task. It does not pretend the sea is small enough to be rushed. And each strip of new map can matter enormously. It may reveal a previously unknown seamount, refine the shape of a canyon, clarify the structure of a ridge, show the contours around a trench, help identify hazards, habitats, or geological processes, offer context for currents, ecosystems, tectonics, or future dives. What seems from afar like just another patch of ocean can become, once mapped more carefully, a distinct place with its own shape and story. That transformation is part of the quiet magic of oceanography. A blank blue area on a simple map is rarely blank in reality. Contains relief, texture, slope, history, the hidden architecture of Earth beneath water. And every time mapping improves, the ocean becomes a little less abstract. Not fully familiar, but more particular, more itself. There is also an important difference between coarse mapping and fine mapping. A broad survey may tell us the general shape of a region, enough to know whether the seafloor is shallow or deep, smooth or rough, rising or descending. But finer scale mapping can reveal much more detailed structure. A ledge, a volcanic cone, a steep escarpment, a field of smaller features invisible in rougher data. And then visual exploration, if it follows, adds another layer entirely. What the rocks look like, what creatures live there, how sediments lie, how currents may be shaping the place. So mapped is not a single condition. It is a spectrum. Place can be vaguely known, moderately known, exquisitely mapped in one patch and hardly characterized in the neighboring patch. The ocean resists simple categories because it is too large and too varied for simplicity. And perhaps that is why the work of mapping feels so human in the best sense. It does not promise total mastery. Promises progress through attention. Small accuracies accumulated, better contours, clearer relationships, a growing respect for what lies below. There is something emotionally reassuring in that process. We live in a world that often expects instant clarity, answers at once, complete pictures, fast conclusions. But the ocean offers another model of understanding. Careful, partial, revisable, deepening over time. A chart improves. A survey returns. A gap is narrowed. A feature once guessed at becomes real in detail. This slower rhythm feels right for the sea, because the sea itself does not hurry to explain. It lets us come closer only little by little. And even then, it always leaves room for the unknown beyond the mapped line. One of the most humbling realities in ocean science is that a large amount of the seafloor still lacks high-resolution mapping. We may know the broad shape of a region from lower detail data or from satellite-inferred measurements of the ocean surface that hint at major seafloor features below, but those are not the same as direct, fine-scale sonar surveys. They are useful beginnings, not complete portraits. Again, that word matters, beginnings. So much of ocean mapping is beginning. Even when a region has been surveyed, new tools may later return to see more sharply. Better resolution can reveal complexity that earlier systems blurred. What once appeared smooth may prove rugged. What once seemed simple may contain hidden forms. The map is never only a static product. It is also a record of the state of our seeing. And perhaps this is why seafloor maps feel so strangely moving. They are not just images of underwater terrain. They are marks of attention, evidence that someone crossed open water, listened carefully, and brought back shape from darkness. A line drawn from echo, a valley sketched from return time, a mountain revealed by patience. There is tenderness in that, especially when we remember that the place being mapped may never be visited directly by most human beings, and may not need to be. The value of mapping is not only in physical arrival. It is in relationship, in understanding the planet more honestly, in replacing blankness with form, not to erase mystery, but to give mystery a truer outline. So tonight, let the image be simple. A ship far offshore, black water beneath it, instruments sending sound downward through miles of sea, the echoes coming back, a strip of hidden earth becoming visible in data, then another strip, then another. No rush, no spectacle, just the slow making of a map, one quiet band at a time, across a world still holding far more darkness and detail than we have yet fully traced. And in that slow work, there is comfort, because it means the planet is not finished with wonder, and we are not finished learning how to listen to it. For a long time, it was easy to imagine the deep ocean as distant from ordinary life, too far down to matter directly, too dark to influence the bright daily world above, too remote to be anything more than a fascinating hidden realm, beautiful perhaps, mysterious certainly, but separate from the lives people live on land. And yet, the deeper science of the sea tells a different story. The unexplored ocean is not separate from the world we know. It helps make the world we know possible. This is one of the most important shifts in understanding the ocean. The hidden sea is not merely a backdrop to life on Earth. It is part of the living machinery of the planet. This darkness does not mean irrelevance. Its inaccessibility does not mean isolation. What happens in the ocean, at the surface, in the twilight layers, across the seafloor, and through the deep circulating body of water itself, shapes climate, weather, chemistry, and life on a global scale. The ocean stores heat. It moves heat. It absorbs carbon. It supports food webs. It produces oxygen through life in its sunlit layers. It transports nutrients across great distances. It influences rainfall, storms, coastlines, fisheries, and the long rhythms of environmental stability. And much of that work depends on systems that humans cannot see just by standing at the shore. There is something almost tender in that. The planet is held together not only by visible things, but by hidden exchanges. A current moving slowly through deep water, heat entering the sea and being stored there, carbon drawn down into ocean systems and carried through biological and physical processes, nutrients rising, sinking, circulating. The bright world depending quietly on what happens in darkness. If we begin with heat, the story already becomes vast. The ocean is an enormous reservoir of thermal energy. Water can absorb and store heat far more effectively than air, and this means the sea plays a central role in shaping the climate of Earth. It softens extremes. It delays and redistributes warming. It carries heat through currents from one region to another, linking distant parts of the globe in ways the eye can never directly see. A coastline does not merely sit beside water. It sits beside one of the planet's great climate engines. Warm currents and cold currents can influence the character of entire regions. Storms draw energy from ocean temperatures. Seasonal patterns are shaped by exchanges between sea and atmosphere. The air above us and the water below are in constant relationship, passing heat back and forth in a conversation so large we often notice it only when the balance shifts. And the deep ocean matters here too, because what the ocean stores, it does not always store only at the surface. Heat can move downward, layers can mix, currents can transport thermal energy through the larger body of the sea. So the deep ocean becomes part of Earth's memory, not memory in the human sense, but in the physical sense. A place where changes can be taken in, distributed, delayed, and held. There is something very calming in thinking of the sea this way, not only as waves and tides, but as memory in motion. A blue body carrying the thermal history of the planet within it. Carbon tells a similar story of hidden importance. The ocean is part of the carbon cycle that shapes Earth's atmosphere and long-term climate. Carbon dioxide can move from air into surface waters. Life near the surface can incorporate carbon through photosynthesis. Organic matter can sink. Chemical processes can store carbon in seawater and sediments over time. Some of this happens quickly, some slowly, some through biological pathways, some through circulation and chemistry. Again, the key truth is gentle but profound. The unseen ocean helps regulate the seen world. What drifts downward through the water column matters. What is stored in deep water matters. What settles into sediments matters. The deep is not just a place where things vanish. It is part of how the planet processes and redistributes what life and climate are continually producing. Then there is the question of life itself. The ocean supports extraordinary biodiversity, from microbes to whales, from coral reefs to abyssal plains, from drifting plankton to vent communities in total darkness. Even species that humans never directly encounter may play roles in food webs, nutrient cycling, and ecosystem balance. And many of the systems we do depend on fisheries, coastal stability, oxygen production, climate regulation, are rooted in marine processes broader and deeper than any single visible habitat. This is important because humans often pay attention only to the parts of nature they can easily recognize. A forest of trees, a herd on grassland, a bird in the garden. But the ocean asks for a different kind of trust. It asks us to understand that invisible abundance still matters. Microscopic plankton matter. Deep currents matter. Bacteria in sediments matter. Hidden migrations matter. A cold, dark volume of water moving slowly through the global ocean can matter just as much as a dramatic visible event on the surface. The sea teaches interdependence at a scale that is almost difficult to hold emotionally. A plankton bloom in sunlit water can help feed larger life. The remains of that life can sink into the deep. The deep stores, transforms, and circulates. Currents rise elsewhere. Nutrients return upward. Surface productivity begins again. The ocean is not a stack of disconnected layers. It is one immense circulating body, linked vertically and horizontally by physics, chemistry, and biology. This is why the unexplored ocean matters so much. Not because every unknown creature must be cataloged for curiosity alone, though curiosity is a beautiful reason. And not because every hidden ridge or trench must be mapped for prestige. It matters because the unknown parts of the sea are still active parts of the Earth system. They influence the planet whether or not we have personally looked at them. The hidden ocean is working all the time, quietly, faithfully, without applause. That may be one of the most comforting thoughts in the entire story. Much of what sustains the world is not loud, not visible, not obvious, current in darkness, a slow mixing of water masses, a rain of organic particles descending through the deep, a bloom of tiny photosynthetic life near the surface, a microbial process in sediment, a migration in the night, a chemical exchange at the boundary of sea and air. These subtle acts, multiplied across the global ocean, become planetary power. And perhaps this is why the ocean deserves not just wonder, but gratitude. Even in the parts we have not fully explored, it is already doing work on behalf of life as a whole. It moderates, stores, connects, feeds, buffers, carries, transforms. The sea is not only scenery, it is infrastructure for a living planet. But unlike roads or wires or walls, its infrastructure is fluid, always moving, always exchanging, always slightly beyond the neat edges of human control. That is why it remains both essential and humbling. We depend on systems we cannot fully command. We are shaped by processes we did not invent. And under the bright, familiar surface of daily life, the ocean continues its slow planetary labor. So tonight, as we think about the unexplored sea, let us think beyond mystery alone. Let us think of importance, of the way darkness can still participate in life, of the way hidden layers can still support the breathing world, of the way a planet can be held stable not only by what is seen, but by what is vast, blue, deep, and mostly out of sight. Beneath the waves, beyond the reach of sunlight and easy maps, the ocean is still helping to write the conditions for weather, climate, and life itself. And it does so with the patience of something older than us, something wider than us, something that has never needed to be fully visible in order to matter. After all of this, a quiet question remains. Why, even now, does so much of the ocean remain unknown? Why, on a planet filled with satellites, sensors, computation, and extraordinary machines, are there still vast regions beneath the sea that remain only partly mapped, briefly visited, or hardly understood at all? The answer is not that the ocean has been ignored, and it is not that humans have failed to care. The answer is simpler and in some ways more beautiful. The ocean remains unknown because it is immense, because it is difficult, because it is expensive to reach, because every layer of it asks something from us: patience, engineering, time, endurance, interpretation, return visits, and humility. And because every answer we gather tends to reveal still more questions beneath it. This is often how real knowledge works, not like a door swinging open once and for all, more like a lantern moving forward through darkness, illuminating one circle at a time. The ocean is perhaps the finest example of that on Earth. Its scale alone is enough to explain much of the mystery. The sea covers most of the planet's surface, and below that surface lies an immense volume extending downward through zones of light, twilight, darkness, pressure, and terrain. To know one patch of seafloor does not mean knowing the next patch. To observe one trench, one ridge, one current, one migrating community, or one vent field is to gain intimacy with a place, not mastery over a realm. This is an important distinction, because the ocean is not one thing. It is many things connected. A planetary system made of different layers, basins, chemistries, climates, habitats, and timescales. Even if every part were equally easy to reach, which it is not, understanding it would still be a vast task because nothing in the ocean exists alone. A current influences temperature. Temperature influences biology. Biology influences chemistry. Chemistry influences carbon storage. Seafloor terrain influences circulation. Light, pressure, nutrients, and motion all weave together. To study the ocean, then, is not just to collect facts. It is to study relationships. And relationships are always deeper than they first appear. Then there is the matter of access. A mountain on land can often be climbed. A forest can be walked through. A desert can be crossed. Even difficult environments on land still belong, broadly speaking, to the same pressure and atmospheric conditions in which human bodies normally function. The deep ocean cannot be entered casually. It resists the body. It requires vessels, sensors, ships, crews, fuel, expertise, weather windows, planning, maintenance, recovery, and often a great deal of money. A single expedition can require years of preparation. A brief descent may depend on technology so specialized that only a small number of institutions in the world can carry it out regularly. This does not make exploration impossible. It makes it precious. Each trip into the deep becomes a concentrated act of attention, carefully planned, carefully funded, carefully executed. And because the work is so demanding, there are limits to how much can be done, how often, and where. It is not enough to be curious. One must also build the means to follow curiosity downward. The ocean's changing nature adds another layer to the challenge. Even when we observe a place once, that place may not remain exactly the same. Water moves, currents shift, seasons pass through the surface and echo downward in different ways. Animals migrate, vents may change over time, sediments settle, storms alter upper layers, climate patterns influence circulation and temperature. Some ocean features are ancient and stable, others are dynamic and responsive. So the sea is not simply unexplored because it is hidden. It is also difficult to capture because it is alive. Any map or image or dataset is, in part, a moment. A true moment, yes, but still a moment in a system that continues moving after the ship has gone. This makes the ocean feel almost like music. You can record it, study it, return to themes, map its structure, but while you listen, it is also unfolding. And the next listening may reveal something changed. There is also a quieter reason the ocean remains unknown. Human attention is limited. Civilizations direct resources unevenly. Some frontiers capture public imagination more easily than others. Space, for example, often appears visually dramatic and symbolically grand. The deep ocean, by contrast, is hidden under familiar water, out of sight, and harder to simplify into a single image or narrative. A rocket launch is visible. A sonar survey is patient. A rover on another world photographs a horizon beneath an alien sky. A deep-sea vehicle may spend hours descending into darkness before revealing a small patch of seafloor in artificial light. The ocean does not always present its wonders in ways that fit human appetite for spectacle. It asks for a slower kind of fascination, and yet perhaps that is part of its dignity. It remains mysterious partly because it will not be hurried into entertainment. It yields its truths more quietly than that, piece by piece, patch by patch, expedition by expedition. And then, when something is found, another mystery often opens behind it. A new species raises ecological questions. A chemical process suggests wider implications. A mapped ridge leads to curiosity about its history. A vent ecosystem invites questions about the limits of life. A signal in the water column points toward behavior not yet understood. The ocean does not simply shrink as we study it. In some ways, it deepens. Its edges of ignorance become more refined, but not necessarily smaller in feeling. This is why science can be so soothing when held gently. Because real understanding does not demand that mystery disappear. It allows mystery to mature. The unknown becomes more textured, more specific, more honest. Not a blank void, but a living horizon. And the ocean is full of such horizons. Some are physical, unmapped seafloor. poorly observed deep habitats, understudied regions beneath ice or far from coasts. Some are biological, species not yet described, behaviors not yet observed, ecological interactions barely understood. Some are chemical and climatic, deep circulation patterns, sediment processes, carbon pathways, responses to changing planetary conditions. The more one looks, the more the unknown takes on shape. And perhaps that is the most comforting answer of all. The ocean remains unknown not because it is beyond meaning, but because it is rich with it. Too rich for a single generation to finish. Too vast for one technology to settle. Too alive to be reduced to a completed inventory. An unfinished world remains beneath the waves because the world itself is still unfolding there. So tonight, if that question returns, why is so much still unexplored? The answer can rest softly, because the ocean is large enough to stay ahead of us. Because darkness, distance, pressure, and time slow our approach. Because hidden systems take patience to understand. Because every place in the sea is connected to others. Because our tools are small compared with the realm they enter. And because Earth, even now, is still more intricate than human certainty. That is not a failure. It is a gift. A reminder that the planet still contains room for wonder, for work, for listening, and for discovery that has not yet happened. A reminder that not everything meaningful has already been found, and that beneath the surface of the known world, the ocean continues to hold open its great blue unfinishedness. And so, after all the ridges and trenches, the drifting lights and hidden migrations, the pressure, the darkness, the chemistry, the strange patient life unfolding where sunlight never goes, we arrive at one final thought, a soft one, a human one. Perhaps the most comforting truth in this whole story is not simply that the ocean is vast. It is that the world is still unfinished. We live in an age that often gives the impression of completion. So much has been named, so much has been photographed, measured, cataloged, searched, archived, uploaded, mapped, and translated into glowing surfaces that fit in the hand. The modern world can feel, at times, as if every mystery has already been reduced into information, as if wonder has become a searchable thing, as if the unknown survives only in the most distant corners of space or in the past, not here, not now, not on the ordinary earth beneath our feet. But the ocean says otherwise. It says that even on this familiar blue planet, there are still vast rooms we have not fully entered. Still landscapes no one has seen in detail. Still lives passing through darkness beyond our gaze. Still patterns unfolding quietly under pressure, carrying on regardless of whether a ship is present above. The ocean does not only contain mysteries, it protects the idea of mystery itself. And that may be why it feels so soothing to think about before sleep. Because a fully explained world can feel strangely small, but an unfinished world remains spacious, breathable, open, a place where imagination is not merely entertainment, but a respectful response to reality. The unknown ocean gives the mind room to soften. It invites us to remember that not everything important must be fully possessed to be meaningful. A trench does not need to be walked by us to be real. A vent community does not need our witness to flourish. A hidden current does not need a name before it can move heat through the planet. The deep sea continues without ceremony, and there is peace in that. There is also peace in the way the ocean humbles human speed. So much of our daily life is built around urgency. Messages arrive instantly. Answers are expected quickly. The mind learns to flinch toward completion, toward the next task, the next update, the next certainty. But the sea works on other timescales. A map is built slowly. A ridge rises over ages. Sediment settles grain by grain. A nightly migration repeats without hurry. The deep stores heat, carbon, and memory overspans longer than a single life can feel. Even discovery itself arrives gradually there. One dive, one sample, one strip of mapped seafloor, one small light in black water. Then darkness again, waiting patiently for the next question. To think about the ocean, then, is to be reminded that slowness is not emptiness. Silence is not absence. Darkness is not the end of life. And incompleteness is not failure. It is simply the natural state of a world still full of depth. Perhaps that is why the phrase unexplored ocean feels so powerful. Not because it suggests lack, but because it suggests possibility. It means Earth is not over. Not in the emotional sense. Not in the imaginative sense. There are still first encounters waiting beneath the sea. Still creatures that may surprise the eye. Still places whose maps will sharpen in years to come. Still questions hidden inside the next echo, the next sample, the next descent. And even if none of us personally enters those depths, it matters that they are there. A person can sleep differently in a world that still contains mystery. More gently, perhaps, less tightly, because the unknown reminds us that reality is larger than our plans, larger than our worries, larger than the rooms we occupy and the screens we look into. Beneath all the noise of human life, there is still a blue planet carrying ancient darkness, submerged mountains, slow currents, and unlit valleys that have never needed our approval to exist. That thought is not frightening. It is relieving. It means the world is not exhausted by what we know of it. It means reality still exceeds us in beautiful ways. It means there are places on Earth where silence has been kept for longer than memory, and where life continues in forms so delicate and strange that they seem almost like dreams made physical. And perhaps there is a quiet lesson in that for the mind at night. You do not have to solve everything before you rest. You do not have to illuminate every corner. You do not have to force the unfinished parts of life into immediate clarity. The ocean does not. It holds what is hidden gently. It lets forms emerge slowly. It allows darkness to remain darkness while still containing movement, structure, and life. There is wisdom in that. The sea teaches that not all truth arrives at once. Some of it glows faintly. Some of it drifts upward at night. Some of it rests in sediment for ages. Some of it waits in pressure and blackness until a careful instrument, a patient mind, or a future generation comes close enough to notice. Until then, it remains no less real for being unseen. Maybe that is the final comfort, that the unseen still belongs to the world, that mystery is not outside reality, but woven through it, that what lies beyond our knowledge is not necessarily hostile. It may simply be deep. So let the last image be this: Earth from far away, a blue world turning quietly in darkness, clouds moving over its surface, continents lit by day on one side, sleeping on the other, and across most of that planet, ocean, Not flat blue color on a map, but volume, layer upon layer of water, sunlit skin above, twilight below, then the great dark body of the sea, ridges forming, trenches descending, creatures glowing softly, currents moving heat in silence, marine snow falling through blackness, vents breathing chemistry into cold water, whales sending sound through the deep, and below all of that, the hidden floor of the planet continuing its slow conversation with time. A world within the world, still unfinished, still listening, still holding secrets in blue. And tonight, as sleep comes closer, perhaps that is enough to know that the earth is wider than worry, deeper than thought, and still, even now, beautifully unexplored.